Hey there, welcome to the CS Out Here podcast number 15. We have an amazing group of guys here today. But before we introduce everyone, we got to thank our sponsors. Number one, our first sponsor we got to thank is Refrag. Use the code NART to save 50% on the next Refrag purchase. Train like a pro, play like a pro, use Refrag. We also want to thank Underdog as our sponsor, a premier prop betting website. Also, you can play best ball and fantasy sports on there. Use the code NART, and with that, they will match all your deposits up to $100. And we have a new sponsor out there in Manscaped, a premier-made grooming male grooming website. Your balls will thank you for using Manscaped. Use the the code NART20 to save 20% on your next purchase and also free shipping. Now, let's introduce our guest for today. We have the man himself, literally our Stephen A. Smith, the king of the shit takes, AnThran.
Yes.
We have a returning guest and one of our beloved, amazing commentator, Skriv.
Thank you very much.
There we go. See a contrast compared to AnThran, so super loved because we actually like him.
To go that far.
So we like him. AnThran is king of shit takes.
You pointed to Skriv when you said that.
No, man, I pointed at you, motherfucker.
Look on the screen. Pay attention.
Also want to thank our producer, Werewolf, for joining us as well. He's doing an amazing job of doing all the producing and everything like that, and better than my shitty producing takes.
I actually disagree. I think Sagka had it down, and then I just made it worse.
No.
Shout to Sagka, the OG producer.
No, I have the shitty producer right here. Let's be real. Okay, now it looks like AnThran went to sunglass mode.
He's a gimmick caster, bro.
What the fuck, man?
All right, now let's begin. First stuff we're gonna do is the buy round. First, for the buy round is we'll give a topic. Everyone will say what they want to say on the specific topic, and I'll score points. The points do not matter. They kind of do because if you're the lowest points, you get quote unquote eliminated. But you can still have your say in the next round. So let's begin in the buy round. The first topic we're gonna hit is Nip adding Aleksib and benching Plopsky. Let's begin with AnThran. What's your take on this?
I think that's a dub, bro. I think Aleksib got the short end of the stick on G2, to be honest with you. I mean, you look at G2 as a roster and a lineup for just about the whole time they've had at least the core of Nico, Hunter, and Jackson, whoever, whatnot. They were always struggling, right? They always were able to make big plays. They were always able to make it deep in tournaments, but when it actually came to grand finals and stuff, that's where they struggled. And I think they did have consistency issues in some regard. I think taking out Aleksib put a majority of the problem on him, or at least made it look like that. And I feel like G2 have always blamed the IGL, where it's Nexa to Aleksib, where I don't even think Nexa was doing all that poorly. I still think it was just a performance issue on other players' parts. Then you have Aleksib getting swapped out, and I mean, the struggles for G2 still kind of continued at the beginning. I guess they look a bit better now, but there is still always those question marks. So I think coming into NIP, a team that's not looking great right now, I mean, we just saw them absolutely get dumpstered in the majority of Pro League and in most of the events they've been playing. They need a reformat. They need a new breath of fresh air, and I think Aleksib brings that in.
All right, let's go to Skriv. What's your take on it?
Well, it's good I'm next because mine's kind of the complete opposite. I think the only good thing about bringing Aleksib in, to be honest, is maybe that you open the door to like an international lineup, right? And moving away from this full Swedish idea. I think for me, it's like Aleksib, you have, you know, the Ents run or whatever, then moves into OG. You can maybe make the argument that for his chops and where they could take him, he doesn't have, you know, quite the right pieces. Then he goes to G2, and although it starts off a bit weird because, you know, they had all these COVID issues and the coach and all that as well also getting COVID, I do sympathize with that, but it never really worked out. A good 6 to 9 month period, you know, to make that work. And for me, it didn't necessarily fall apart, but definitely nowhere near where they wanted to be. And now that they've kind of gone back, you know, and they've got Huxley, who's a little freer, I guess. It's only the group stage, but they look better off the press than Aleksib's G2 look better off the press. We can say that at the very least. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's overrated, but I just don't think that he's the player coming in. Then you also have, you know, the sort of appendages attached to that they've changed around. Essetag's going back to rifling. Rez is moving on to the AWP. I don't think that is the wisest move. It smacks of desperation. It smacks of maybe they're going to get rid of Essetag as well to get a proper AWPer in. If they're actually going to stick with Rez on the AWP, I think that is a terrible move, to be honest, because he is far and away your best and most consistent player. And then you've got all this weirdness. They're now, I guess, going to come in English. And Brolin said he didn't really want to do that. He wanted to be in a Swedish team. So I think there's so many question marks behind it that it's such a risky move and kind of a desperate move. The two things, like I say, you've got open the door to international lineup. And I'm actually kind of interested to see Hampus freed up a little bit and see what he's capable of.
I kind of agree with Skriv on this one. I'm not necessarily super hyped about Aleksib coming in. You know, I agree that he probably got more than his fair share of the blame when it comes to G2's performance. But generally, it's just like, I don't know. It doesn't excite me. I don't really know how his system will work with NiP and the players they have. It kind of feels like a really unstable roster now. I don't really know. Like, Rez on the op does just feel like a patchwork solution. I'm not quite sure that it's going to work in the long run. And even, you know, as it stands, Rez is one of those players where, like, one round he looks like the best player in the world, and then he goes missing for the next 7, right? So it's I don't know. It's just a bit of a weird move. I think removing Plopsky is sort of, it was needed, right? Like, Plopsky was really, really good. You know, he came up a little bit after Brolin, sometime in like 2018, I want to say, back on Existent White and Existence Galaxy. And it was like, oh, you know, this really promising young Swedish player. Cool. There's a bunch of these guys now. And slowly over the years, he just got worse and worse and worse. And while, yeah, you know, he didn't have the worst events recently, I just kind of feel like, you know, it's like BMAS having a slight surge in performance before getting kicked off of MOUZ. You know, nice, cool. Maybe it raises your stock a little bit as you try to look for a new team, but I think it was just necessary to get Plopsky off of there, unfortunately. He is only 20 years old. Hopefully, you know, he really can bounce back sometime soon, but he's got to take a step down. I don't know. It's a weird one. I really don't think it fixes everything for NiP by any means, but hopefully the international avenue is going to be a bit more interesting, or they're actually going to make use of their academy team down the line and bring up new talents.
You okay? Finish off before we go with a little rebuttal.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm not a fan of it at all. I mean, you look towards NiP as a roster, and I think one of the biggest things for them was that they were lacking firepower because of how poor Plopsky was playing. So fair enough, that getting rid of Plopsky was the right decision. But then you bring in Aleksib, who's not adding to the firepower, and the addition, as you mentioned, of Skriv, of kind of now they're coming in English. That's the whole reason why Brolin left Fnatic. 3 months later, he joins his NiP team to speak in Swedish, to now be speaking in English. So he's gonna be pissed, like holes in the desk. I'll be fuming. And then the thing for me is, I feel like this NiP sort of kind of lost their identity, because now they're just in this limbo situation where they're a roster who don't really have a set play style. They're moving away from the calling of Hampus, which I don't think the calling of Hampus was necessarily bad. It was just, of course, you could see on the T side, Hampus would call around himself. It was very reliant on Hampus finding success and Hampus, you know, making these moves. You look at kind of Mirage, for example, do these classic things where you know, go in kind of a ladder room to, you know, wrap in behind them, flanking. It was all very reliant on Hampus finding success. And if it didn't, they crumbled a bit. And I guess they want to change that scenario and bring in Aleksib's experience. But I don't like the play. I think if you're NiP and you're taking a risk, you look towards kind of the, like, talent you could bring in. You know, you even speak of like tier 1 AWPers that are kind of in limbo at the moment. Mantu's not a bad example. If you want to go internationally speaking, why would you not replace the AWPer with an actual good AWPer of Mantu who can compete at tier 1? Or if you want to take a risk, look at some of these young Swedes out there. Like, for me, like, I was thinking Chorzy. I mean, you think about a young Swede who is dominated at the tier 2 level under Savage. I mean, you look towards, of course, when he's at Apeks, he got put on a rifle. He's not a rifler. He's always been an AWPer. So he got shafted there, which I think is why, you know, you look to his stats and they're not great. I think, generally speaking, it's a bad move. I'm not a fan of it. I think they just kind of lack firepower. I really just think they're going to be like Fnatic before they made the changes they got now, where they were just this like soulless team, basically, who weren't performing and are just going to be constantly looking for changes. And also now with roster lock, they're stuck with this, in my opinion, pretty shit change for a long time now. So I'm not a fan. I just think they're going to be really mid. I don't think they're going to stay in the top 10. Overall, not impressed, basically.
All right, AnThran, I saw you get your hand raised up, and you're 1v3ing these guys right now. Give me your rebuttal right now.
So to start it off, I'm going to start with Skriv. And he talked about how Aleksib didn't do that well on ends, which I think is valid, right? But then he comes into OG. And the whole point of this is I think you don't look into what happened to Aleksib specifically enough. Now, there are obviously the issues of he has gotten chances and he hasn't necessarily delivered up to expectations. But at the same time, I think it's valid to look deeper into these teams because you look at when they brought him into OG, they had 2 stars who had never competed at tier 1. You had 2 rejects from the tier 1 scene, and you're trying to put a team together to try to compete on a global level. That's not going to go well. I'm not saying he still didn't do anything. Obviously, Aleksib isn't a firepower piece, but I still think we underrate him as an IGL in a system that has somewhat worked in the past, and with better firepower and better consistency, which I think G2, when he was on there, heavily lacked, it's probably going to look a lot better. Now, as for the identity crisis, this one goes on to Frog. As for the part of Aleksib not fixing many issues, I don't think he has to. I think NIP just need a breath of fresh air. You look at before, they were having all these struggles. These past couple of events didn't go very well. They didn't look all that great. It's not like they were performing completely piss poor. You go back to events before that, in most of the showdowns, they were doing fairly well. I'd say even middle of the pack towards top. They did pretty well at the last major where they placed in top 8. I think the problem with NIP is they've fallen out of relevancy, and now there's nobody else to try to bring them back into it. You've got 3 people who have no idea what to do anymore. You've got a ton of comfortability issues. We just talked about Rez switching to the EWP. You've got people not knowing if they want to do what they want to do anymore. So I don't think the issue is necessary. I think the issue is the lack of creativity because it's been the same NIP for so long. They haven't had a really big refresh of what's going on. And I think Aleksib brings that to the table. And that's why I think he's a great pickup, just in the sense of refreshing now what they already built on and can probably even help Rez get more comfortable in the opping perspective. You know, he worked with M0nesy. He's worked with other oppers in the past. It's not like he's not done this before. Now, as for, I think I actually pretty much commented on Neokai's thing too, but it's still just like when NIP had an identity and when NIP were comfortable, it showed. They performed well. And I think that's something to definitely look towards as Aleksib brings in that outside perspective.
It's a pretty good rebuttal from AnThran right there. Hitting on everything. But does anyone else have anything else to say? Like with
I can
what's the
follow
role?
that.
Go right ahead, man.
I mean, this for me, it was like, you know, NIP always tout themselves. I mean, even the CEO, I forget his name, it's like Cars or something like that. He always touts himself as NIP having this like NIP system, but no one knows what this NIP system is, and it's very evident that they don't know what this NIP system is because they don't play it. They look sloppy a lot, right? And I think bringing Aleksib's not solving that because. Like I actually really like the idea of Hampus not IGLing because I think as a rifler just solely, Hampus is a really, really good rifler. So he doesn't have to do the IGLing role anymore, which means that he can play to his strengths. But when you just chalk this up to pros and cons, what is Aleksib actually adding to this team? Because they're going to want to stick with like what is NIP's system. So he's going to have to mold himself around that NIP system. And then you're hindering players because you're changing the roles of Estag, you're changing the roles of Rez, most importantly. And Frog, you mentioned it. Kind of for me, like Rez is one of those players that you have to look at as kind of the big hitter, right? He's the one that, for me, has to bring the firepower. And then now putting him into what is essentially a crutch because you don't really want him AWPing. And I think it's not good enough to be a tier 1 side and not have an actual AWPer. Like it is, in my eyes, just sort of moronic because you have to have an AWP to compete in tier 1. As much as people want to make the argument that you can't just play 5 rifles and chill. And I know they're making this. I saw them the statement. It was like, oh, you know, Rez is up there with. I was saying like up there with like Simple and Zywoo as an AWPer. He's not. Like let's not beat around the bush here. Like that is bullshit. Like he just isn't. Like he will never has been and never will be on that level. Like it's simple as like just don't make these dumb comparisons. Like it's just not true. And he's a fantastic player. But he needs to play to his strengths. His strengths is being a very, very versatile and adaptable rifler, not an AWPer. I feel like they should have brought in an AWP who has firepower. As I mentioned m0nesy, but there's plenty of other options out there. But if you're going to take a risk for me, it wasn't IGLing that was their problem. It was firepower. And the risk should have been in to bring in a youngster. Like same way G2 with m0nesy, of course, he's a bit of a special case in that thing. Look at Mowers as well, bringing all those youngsters from the academy because they're taking a risk to bolster firepower with the likes of Zertian, the likes of Torzi. They should have done the same thing. Bring in an AWPer who's young, who versatile, who they can mold to this NIP system that they keep talking about, but no one actually knows what it is.
I'd just like to add to that as well. If they were so confident in Rez's opping, why was SSHack doing it? You know,
Exactly.
it's like it's just a weird one for me. It doesn't make any sense.
I still think there's always the possibility of Dev1ce coming back in.
I
No,
mean,
I can tell you for a fact it's not happening.
Look,
It
because
isn't.
I think your points are valid when you talk about still having an Oppers issue. I don't think Esatag was ever going to cut the bill as an Opper, to be quite honest with you. I think that was a questionable move in the first place. But at this point, you talk about roster lock, you talk about making moves, and why not change out to an Opper? Why put Rez on the op when he's uncomfortable? I think it's like, I definitely feel like there's got to be something more to it, right? Because they always have had Dev1ce on the bench. It's like you don't want to commit to picking up an Opper when there's always that uncertainty of one of the best to ever do it coming back.
He's not coming back.
But I mean,
he isn't.
It's
like confirmed,
nothing.
basically.
Bro, confirmed is too much of a term that's thrown around.
No, because he's got 2.5-year contract. He's got 2 months left, and he's already in contacts. And Astralis have literally put in an offer today for him. He's not going back. He's not going back on that roster. He's going back to Astralis. It's the worst kept secret in CS. Everyone knows he wants to go back to Astralis.
Dev1ce has always said he's never going back to Astralis. Like, he said this multiple times. Like, and I know
he needs somewhere to compete, though. I think
either way, he's lying. Either way, it's a lie, regardless of which way you put it. I'm telling you that right now. It's like he's either going back to Astralis and that's a lie, or it's a lie that he's going to Astralis and he's going back to
the way out.
I don't.
Dev1ce is coming back in. It's like
I'm
actually so sure of it. Like, I'm so.
But then
certain
in that case, with a team like NIP, they're so legendary in the scene. I think they know that you can't compete at tier 1 without an op. I don't think they would leave that big of a hole in the roster knowingly. So I definitely think there's a chance that it comes back. And in that case, when Dev1ce makes his move to Astralis, I will very much so forfeit up my 5 points right now. And when he does come back, I am getting 5 points back on the next time I come.
But maybe that is a NIP system. They don't need an Opper. Fuck it.
That is nah, bro. That's
a good one, mate.
Yeah, man. That's what Liquid said
fall
too.
out of top 15. I did not have an offer, basically. Like, I mean, like everyone keeps saying it's the most OP gun in the game as well. I mean, everyone keeps making this argument. Like, right, so then if it's the most OP gun, why are you not having someone who's actually competent with it? Not saying Rez isn't. He's very good, but I mean, have a dedicated AWP and let Rez be free roam.
I mean, I was just gonna say there's kind of the two big angles. I think. One thing that maybe we overlook a little bit, like, you know, you talk about the CS and that sort of angle. I always like to bring in the sort of business angle. I think they've gone, right, we need maybe a bit of a change up. And Hampus has perhaps said, right, I want a rifle. Let's bring Aleksib in. That's money. They're also, you know, $1 million in the hole and probably not going to get any money at all for Dev1ce. So it's just going to be, you know, so pulling someone else in, I think that for now, they've clearly shown with like, bloody Esatag on it and all that. They're sort of you know, not afraid to split and try something a bit different and change up the roles or whatever, if that might work. You never know. Because obviously there is a world, we're going off of what we know. There is a world in which Rez actually is sick on the AWP, right? That could happen. You never know. But the thing is, it's a risk, and it's a pretty dangerous risk, you know. It is a massive, it's sort of a change of the field in regular sports. You go from like a defensive to an attacking player or whatever, maybe midfielder to attacking player. Maybe you would say Neo Kai, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm onto something there.
You
get what I mean.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, you could go from like right mid to right wing or some shit. You know, it's like there's not a
not
crazy
massively.
amount. Yeah, because he's already an attacking player. He's just changing weapons, right? But the other thing that I think is really problematic is you're also kind of, you know, you're AWPing with Esatag has maybe gone from like being here to like here, because Rez, I guess, could be better than Esatag at the moment. Most options would be, but your rifling's gone from like that same sort of level all the way down. You're now, not only are you taking a risk on Rez being good on the AWP, you're also taking a risk that if you give Hampus more resources and freedom, if you give Brolin more resources, because you would imagine they would now turn him into their star rifler. You're taking a risk on the fact that are they going to be able to perform to the same level that Rez was? You know, where Brolin's had some good series, some good games, but it seems very up and down, you know, plus the factor that extracurricularly, he's going to probably have slightly worse comms, slightly worse mental. And it's another, it's like, now obviously, if you know everything to know about Dev1ce, he's had a lot of stuff going on and it's been very, very weird. It's another sort of coming in, maybe not quite getting what you want as a player and things not quite working out. So not necessarily promises broken, but the environment is totally different from what you were expecting when you came in. So they have so many of these things now. There's firepower, there's, you know, logistics of the game, and then there's also kind of keeping their players in a level. And you've got guys like Hampus and Rez who have been in this team for a long time. So if this one doesn't work, they might just be like, you know what? I think this
Stop
team's
this.
cursed.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
off. International rosters are everywhere. I'm going, mate. I'll go join, a Mouse or maybe like there's plenty that are opening, an Ents perhaps, there's options out there for these guys.
Just to add to that as well, kind of about the options, I think Nip as well, on the business side, are slightly kicking themselves by letting Fuzi go to Sangal. They've got this Orpo who can compete, basically. He's played with the team before. Okay, granted, his performances weren't, they weren't standout spectacular. But you got a Swedish-speaking guy who's played Orp already, has pracked and scrimmed with them for a regular basis, and is already part of the organization. So you're not paying any money. It's like, it's free, right? And they let him go to Sangal when they know Plopsky is and has been shit for a long time. Like, he's not been up that level. There's no beating around the bush. I know he had a couple of games in Pro League when they'd already were not making playoffs, so it didn't make any difference anyway. But there's this young guy, and then of course Fuzi's gone to Sangal. Sangal literally said to Fuzi, do whatever you want. Play your AWPing style. We're not going to control you. And what has he done? He's literally hard carried them to qualification for the RMR. I mean, I casted like their whole run basically through that. I think it was the third RMR, the fourth RMR, and he was unstoppable. Like, Fuzi was one of the best AWPers I saw the entire time. I mean, he looked streets better than Farley on the other side of the bracket. So it's just, for me, it was, I think Nip will be kicking themselves. And I feel like this is just a panic. Just that, roster locks just happened. They're just like, oh shit, like we need to make a change because this team isn't going to compete. I don't think they've helped themselves. I think they've arguably taken a step back because they've just, the cons outweigh the pros in my eyes because they've just limited everybody else by bringing in now essentially another IGL alongside their other IGL, who are both in the last few months on like red ratings. I don't really see the positives here because Aleksib's system isn't even. It's not like your Carrigan, who's got this system that is proven in Mouse and going God knows whatever. It doesn't matter what speaking people you are, who you are. You've got Aleksib who in G2. I know we can shit on him for G2 because we can and can't because he gets the bad end of the stick, but I don't think he's got this dreamboat system which can save any team. I think NIP they're saving grace with someone who could actually pick this team up a little bit because they do struggle. And of course I think one of those teams who mentally speaking are pretty bad. I see them get tilted so often where you can see them make very sloppy errors, and if you're gonna have an IGL, you need them to calm them down a bit, actually kind of keep them in line. And I just feel like for me, Aleksib isn't that person who's, this like someone like a Carrigan you can look up to, someone who calling wise, you can always be like, okay, we can rely on him to pull us out of a sticky situation. I mean, I can't even think of any options apart from back in that NartOutHere where Aleksib has single-handedly pulled this team out of a dark situation. So I don't know. I think the cons outweigh the pros massively for me, but it's a gamble. And God knows it will pay off. I don't think it will.
I think saying that he can't help with the tilt issues is quite wrong, honestly. If you think about Aleksib's career, he's definitely dealt with those tilters before, and it's not like he doesn't have the experience to actually calm that down. You think of the entire meme of G2 and Nico's attitude and how I don't think it was all that prevalent when Aleksib was on that team. Now, the same thing can go for OG when he's playing with two young players. Obviously, you know how big mentality can be with younger players and how much more of a problem it will be to actually have to solve it out because they don't have the tier 1 experience to know how to deal with those situations. Same thing can happen going into NIP, where I think maybe he can be a little bit of a shoulder to cry on for them, for starters. I also think we discredit we talk about the NIP system. I think this pickup from NIP in general kind of says that that's going out the window, right? I think even they understand at this point that it's not working anymore. The NIP system very clearly has failed them and will not work in the future. That's what I think Aleksib is coming in for, a different outlook on play. That's why I put so much emphasis on it, because if you were going to stick with this same system and try to keep things normal as to what they've been, you wouldn't pick up Aleksib. That's right. This feels like a big change to me, including all the stuff they've made around it, where Hampus is no longer IGLing, where Esatag's giving the op over to Rez, and they're probably going to try to transition the Star Rifler over to him. Look, Esatag had a small point in time where he was doing good. That was on Astralis. That was a long time ago. And I know that's kind of where he got his shine from, but at the same time, I think that had to do with the organization of the team in general. I guess Glaive's system and Astralis in total has always made people look at least good. They've always looked great under his system. So Aleksib could be the one to bring that back. Again, it's just mix and matching IGLs at this point, but I think considering Aleksib has definitely had tons of taste with what it's like to deal with stars and how to play to them properly, it's not a bad pickup.
All right, guys, we have a lot of topics to move on. Let's move on to the next one because we could talk like a whole 2 hours on this issue right here. All right, the next big thing was the Rio just announced today. If we have the Twitter, if you could pop up the Twitter post really fast. That they switched they added more seats to the venue. That I'm being
Yeah.
correct. 1 sec.
Yeah, they have like double
is-
capacity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have they've increased it a bit, but I think the main thing for the numbers is that they're increasing the amount of days that they're going to have a live crowd.
Well, it's a live crowd the entire way through, basically.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
every
Yeah,
stage of the
12
way.
days.
But I think
So
for
good.
I just like obviously like don't want to like take the ground, but like with that every way through, for me it kind of seems like they're setting up for just seeing them Brazilian teams fall out early doors
Right.
because like they're waiting for it.
I have the Twitter. It says like we have IEM Rio's expanding to 100K fans over 12 days. Live audience for challengers and legends. Increased capacity with the 360 view. The Fan Fest of Gauls. Okay, more tickets. So
Mhm.
Frog, I'll let you, since you're the bottom at the moment, I'll let you speak on this.
Overall, I think this is a pretty big W. I mean, I like this whole fanfare thing with the Golas thing because it's like if you're gonna take a chance on doing something different with an event and try to get a lot of people involved, we're better to do it than fucking Rio, right? Like, there's not going to be a place where you're going to get that many passionate fans actually wanting to participate in something like this. So I think that's really cool. I love the new venue idea, the fact that it's going to be like 360 degrees. Hopefully it looks something kind of like what PGL Krakow looked like in 2017. Because man, that stage was awesome, right? The fact that it's just all around, it's this arena thing, kind of like UFC like in a way, right? I don't know if there's going to be the same kind of like glass box things around the players, the booths, but hopefully. But generally, I think that'll be a really, really cool setting. Now, obviously, I'm not planning on going to Rio myself, but it's good that they've given more people an opportunity to attend, both by making it longer and by also, just adding more tickets, making it a bigger venue and all that. Overall, I don't know. I think these are good changes. I don't think there's anything really to complain about. I guess as Neokai mentioned, like there's maybe the fact that not many Brazilian teams will attend, or maybe they'll get knocked out early. We'll have to see. But overall, I think it'll be quite good, quite a good show.
I think everyone would kind of agree on that, unless AnThran wants to be the opposite of it, but I don't think you will.
I mean, I got
mean,
a few things to say as well. If
There
I'm
you go.
fine.
I'll let you say it really good before I say it. Let AnThran talk.
Yeah. I think there's definitely an angle where hopefully they know what they're getting into a little bit, I suppose, right? Because it is going to be incredibly busy. And the sort of safe angle to take is that Brazilian fans can be quite passionate. So I think that, they will have to be careful on that front. But I think it will look a lot better. Obviously, we've got a few nice optics angles for ESL where it's like, you've opened up that back area, so you have the full capacity of the arena. When they say increase capacity, it's kind of like, well, you were using some of the space. I'm a really big fan. I think actually the best addition is getting sort of the fanfare thing and the outside viewership.
Agreed.
It's something that Wimbledon, for example, in the UK, because there's not enough space. There's not enough space on the tennis courts to get everyone, that wants to see it in there. So why not let people, watch? And the thing is, as well, it's like it's going to grow viewership. It's going to get people who maybe wouldn't have gone now going, and also people who are maybe not into CS, get them into CS, for the live event angle. So yeah, I actually think that is probably the best part about this, is that maybe we start to do that a bit more often with the bigger events, and it just gets more and more people watching and involved, and etc. etc.
I'm with Skriv on this, sort of, at least in the sense of it being very big that they add more room for the spectators. I actually don't think it's necessarily as big as a move because more people are going to be sitting there, but more so because of the viewership angle, because it's so easy to get excited for a game. Even if you know jack shit about it, it's so easy to get excited, to get hyped up for a game if you hear the excitement there with you. And one of my favorite events to always watch for that reason was, I think it was IEM Sydney, which they haven't done in quite some time. But
Yeah, it's
I mean,
was the last one.
some of the most highly viewed events, highly viewed clips come from that event because of how into it the crowd gets. That's what you're already getting in South America. And it was a very obviously needed change, considering the tickets sold out in like a few hours when they announced it. So, I mean, the fact that it didn't happen sooner is kind of surprising, but there is another thing that I think it's going to present an extra factor to that. We talk about South American teams and how they're probably going to get dumpstered out in the early rounds. I don't think that's true. Like, I think with how Pain have been looking recently, I don't think I think it's not too crazy to think they might make it far, even up to the Legend stage, especially with the home crowd behind them. Now, there's the first issue of having it be in South America for South American teams, because they're obviously going to have bias towards them at every step of the way, but more so the other teams going against them. When you look at and take it from somebody who went to an event where there was an entire French crowd cheering against you every time you got hit, it is very, very mentally taxing, draining, hard to focus, and hard to think when you have the entire home crowd against you. Every time they find an opening frag, every time they take map control, every time they flash somebody, you are going to hear people get loud. You are going to get in your own head quick. And those teams that have slight mental issues are going to collapse at this event. And it's not going to be said for the same counterparts in the Brazilian opposition. You've already got great Brazilian teams in Furia. And I mean, I'd argue Imperial's not great, but they're easily a qualificant for the majors. Same goes for Pain and all these other stars coming up in the South American scene. This is just absolutely massive for them. It's probably going to be the most viewed CS event ever. And it might have the most viewed clips of it ever because of the crowd.
Speaking of clips, you know Nart's gonna be just killing themselves of all those clips that are be available. Sorry, I got to shout out to Nart right there.
Of course.
Goni, okay?
I forgot to
I
say.
was gonna add. Oh yeah, go for it. Take the floor.
Now, there's one other part. And this, Skriv and Neokai could probably relate to this, but the commentating in that event is going to be great, man. I'm telling you,
God.
they are going to get so into it.
I'll link you guys this clip. I've got this one. You've probably all seen it on Twitter at least once, but it was in like a South American qualifier, and a guy jumps out of heaven on overpass and he no-scopes through the box, and it was like Sharks versus Isurus or something, like, with a tier 2. Oh mate, the commentating, they are like losing their mind, and
all the Brazilian commentators.
Yeah, and imagining that in the arena is going to be insane. Like I'm actually looking forward to. I think all in all, this is only positives for me. I mean, it shows as well that ESL listen, which is the best thing, because the first thing you saw when they announced the original kind of setup, where it was like 7.5 thousand people watching, the comments were flooded with, "This is not enough." Like we're like, I mean, arguably, I think it's even safe to say that Brazil is the most dedicated nation in terms of CSGO. I mean, they are as hardcore as they get, basically, and they filled that thing out easily. And to double the capacity, even some would even say it might not even be enough because of how dedicated it is. I mean, the viewership is going to be ridiculous. I'd be very surprised if this doesn't break records for viewership numbers with in-person and online, just because of how good it's going to be. ESL obviously know how to run these big events. I think it's going to be really good. The arena as well, the M0nesy arena, is actually a really cool arena. I think I watched them. It was like a Brazil play volleyball there. I watched them play, and it's huge. It gives me kind of flashbacks of Boston as well, which is also 360, if I'm right in saying. Which is, I mean, a lot of people argue that being the best major ever. So, I mean, that's really, really exciting. The thing you mentioned, AnThran, I had this conversation earlier, and I really I like speculating about it, is about the crowd. Like, obviously, Brazilians are going to be pretty hostile to anyone who's not Brazil, which is absolutely fair enough. Like, I mean, we see it happen all the time. The Danish fans do exactly the same thing to anyone who's not Australis, essentially.
Turkish.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I actually really like the thought process of, because there's, I mean, if you look at how the RMRs are set up with the qualification coming through, there's a lot of potential for some youngsters to make it through. And you look towards the changes that have been made recently, like NAVI, they're now basically NAVI's Academy, let's be perfectly honest, with JDC towards the desertion. They're all actually children, more or less. So, and you look at like the experience of a lot of these, even these people coming through, like the experience at the higher level on LANs, because of COVID, is pretty limited for some of these like young fresh guys. I mean, M0nesy doesn't have a huge amount of LAN experience compared to, your likes of Astralis are coming through. So I'm really interested to see how this affects the youngsters, because, they always say like diamonds are made under pressure. This is where we're going to see which one of these young stars can really live it up when it matters most, when they have 15,000 people hurling abuse at them when they get a double kill, something like that. I really like the thought process behind it. I think it's gonna be awesome. I think as well they've done a really good thing with Goals. He is the name and face of Brazilian CSGO. Like, he is the guy. Like, everybody knows him. Any stream, he could be streaming a black screen and it'll get 50,000 viewers. Like, he's actually the god. I don't know how he does it, but he's got the pull factor. Goals is like, I never know what he's saying, but it's entertaining. So that's enough for me. It's one of those things. I just think they've done everything right here. They've increased capacities. They have more fans, and even from a business perspective, it just needs more money for ESL. They're not complaining at all. They got Goals, which means, I mean, that's going to be a brilliant experience. So I think all in all, it's really positive. I'm really excited to see how this affects the CS though, because I just keep thinking about the youngsters. If like, if some of them crumble on the big stage, even though, you know, they're very good online or very good in like a studio, for example, is it going to be different? And then, you know, maybe this is where we're going to see where potentially someone who we didn't really think about could be a star because they can compete. And also, you know, people keep, you know, shitting on teams like Astralis, for example. And if they were to make it through into Rio, they're not going to be phased. So is this going to be the revitalization of Astralis, for example? Because they don't care about 20,000 people shouting at them. They're used to that. They've had that for the last decade. It doesn't phase any of them. Farley, to be honest. But they in the grand scheme, this might be, you know, some of those old guard teams, maybe like your Imperials, who have been in current terms not great, but they're so good with the crowd. I mean, I was on the desk for Melbourne, for example, and Pain and Imperial, the way that they play off the crowd, and I don't know why, but for some reason there was like 200, 300 Brazilian fans who'd flown to Melbourne for this gig. But they were sick, and they got a boost off the crowd, and I think it's going to help them even more. I think Pain specifically, I'd be very surprised if we don't see something special out of Pain. Zevi and Skulls are two of the most talented youngsters I've seen in an extremely long time. They are insane.
All right, so we're gonna. I'll let you finish it off. Then we're gonna move to the next topic.
Okay, I know this one's gonna win brownie points with you because I disagree with the point Neokai said about Astralis. Now I know Astralis are battle tested, are experienced, the whole 9 yards. But sagka knows as well as I do that does not matter a damn bit when you get into a stadium loud enough. Case in point, last night in the damn Seahawks game, if people get loud enough, you can't hear, you can't communicate properly. You've got to blow timeouts. Some people aren't going to be able to hear the calls. They're going to make misplays because of it. They're going to get caught off guard. That's why I think this is going to be a completely different experience than any event ever. You've never had this passionate of a fan base at this size, at this kind of a place. This is something no teams are going to be used to at all. And that just gives the Brazilian crowd or the Brazilian teams such a massive advantage.
I'm not saying Astralis are good, by the way. I'm just saying.
I'm not. I'm just saying.
I will stand in that camp for a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. It's just the fact that it's like, it doesn't matter the experience. It's so hard to communicate and get all that shit across the line.
I had to give him brownie points because me and him were watching that Monday Night Football game, and Russell Wilson just got screwed by Seattle.
Bro,
due to the noise.
He couldn't call. They consistently got flagged for delays of game, for false starts, because it's just communication errors.
Well, the NAVI thing, right? When you could see, they could hear through their own comms, right? So I get what you mean. I'll let you go.
I gotta give him a point for that. So, all right, and we're gonna move on to the next one. It's this got announced this week. It's the Blast Major, the first one to 2023. It's gonna be in Paris. So we're going to hit it off with Frog, get some points on the board. The Frog, hit it off.
Generally, I'm really hyped for this. I mean, I think Paris is a beautiful city. I got the opportunity to visit last December. Fantastic place. I'm super excited to go because I missed Antwerp as well. And I'm not going to fly all the way to Brazil on the other side of the world, sadly. So super excited about Paris, super excited about it being the first Blast Major. You know, when you think back to... frogs. But super excited for the first Blast Major because when you think back to their first events when they were super experimental, you know, Blast was kind of hated for a period. But you know, they've stuck to it. They've, you know, really tried to improve, and now they make some of the best events in terms of production quality, in terms of, you know, even some of the formatting. It's just super cool. I'm super excited to see that event. The fact that it was announced by the president of France as well, you know, is a big deal because if you look back to say Valorant or even League of Legends, right, and them hosting that event in Iceland, you know, there was the cooperation with the government there and making all of that happen during the peak of the pandemic, sort of. The fact that we're getting governments involved in Counterstrike, and you know, for me is huge because a lot of people think of CS as being like, you know, it's the whole meme of dead game, haha, you know, or it being really expensive or difficult to run events in Counter-Strike. And the fact that we are sort of seeing such praise, you know, such high, like, value by a government and like the prestige of like, oh yeah, we're excited to host this in our home country. It's just super cool. Obviously, there's the whole fact that it's going to be in French, right? Not a lot of people speak French, obviously, outside of France.
It might not be though.
It might not. I don't know. It seems potentially that might be the case. I don't know. If it is, it's unfortunate because, you know, more people will have traveled to Antwerp given that from across Europe, people can go. It's going to be in English, people understand. If it is in French, that's a bit unfortunate. I don't care. I'm French Canadian, so that's it's all the same for me. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is going to be super hype. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be one of the best events ever, hopefully. So just damn excited for it to happen now.
Is it free reign here?
You know what? I'll give it a Skriv because we haven't heard from him for a little bit. Then we'll go free reign between you two.
Sure. I don't know. I don't have too much to say. I think, at least to add on, right? I feel like it does have the potential to be probably like the best online major. I'm not quite sure. As far as I'm aware, it's like in law, right? But there's maybe a chance you got the president on board or whatever. I feel like live it might be a bit weird. But at the same time, I've not been to too many super massive live events, right? I don't know that you can really hear the commentary live that well, to be fair, when, the atmosphere's going off and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that it'll be like that. You're obviously going to go live because you want to see the teams, you want to see them up close, you want to be in the atmosphere of everyone cheering and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know that, the commentary is a nice angle, but I don't know that it'd be a massive make or break. I feel like this would be a great one for some of the UK gang to get down because we can just like hop on the Eurostar and it's not too far to get there. So I'm kind of excited for that. And then also I think as well the big thing for me is that we talk about it could be one of the best, etc., etc. We're gonna have Rio, which is gonna have this great crowd aspect to it and the kind of passion and energy behind it. And then we'll move into another major that has a different sort of angle where the Blast production, and you would hope that they're going to be able to, with the Valve supported money, pump a lot more of these creative ideas that we've seen them have over the past few years into this product. So I feel, regardless of what is the best major ever, is it E-League, is it down to the games, is it down to the production, I think that we're going to have two banging majors in a row. And hopefully, yeah, like post-COVID, it's been a bit of a scale-up, really, because I would say Stockholm, there were some technical issues which can take away from it, not having, like, the desk on site and stuff for the whole thing and all that. And then, Antwerp's a little bit better. Rio should be an absolute banger, and then the Blast Major's going to look great. So I think we're in for a fantastic, like, 6 months of, a little bit longer, it's like 8 months or whatever of Counterstrike. Yeah, really, really excited to see these two majors back to back.
All right, free reign between you guys.
I think there is a low-key L to this event that nobody's really talking about, and that's that I knew, dude, I've always got to provide the antithesis to it.
But it's like when you open a sentence like that, guy,
low-key L. I was like, oh my god. Right,
let me rephrase.
Go on.
There are two ways to look at this. There is a big W, and then we've already mentioned with the French government, with the president and everything being invested into esports, one of the only countries that does it. And the other side, which is the L of, there aren't really any good French teams. There's Vitality, and they're not even that much French anymore. That, like, if you look at almost every one of these majors, there's always a team to follow that's probably going to make a deep run that's just pretty much majority one side, in it being like in Stockholm, it was NIP. In Berlin, it was big. Well, even though they didn't go very far. But Vitality isn't even very French anymore. Like, they've got 3 of their core of French players, which obviously are going to stay. But that's it. Like, you go down, you've got Falcons and Heat, who, let's be honest, might not even qualify for the damn thing. That's the question. And you don't really have many of those teams you're going to be able to follow. I think it's just going to end up being another major at the end of the day, depending on the form Vitality take. Because while we have reason to believe they might look good after Pro League, this is about a half year in the future. Who knows? Maybe they make roster changes before it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they get better results. Maybe they don't. Maybe things change. I don't like that. I don't like that there's not much representation in France and not a lot to make a major out of it. I love that Blast gets a major. I think they're going to absolutely kill it on the production side, but I think it's severely going to lack in the crowd hype and investment into it because there's not going to be a big story team going into it. Other than, again, Vitality, which they've got a fairly dedicated fan base, but past that, that's like it. And Vitality could easily get out before the quarterfinals.
I think I'd have to hard disagree with that. I just think, first of all, the Golden Hornets are one of the most, like, loudest, dedicated. If anyone was there in Stockholm, you know them. They're one of the loudest. But also, you keep forgetting that G2, at Stockholm and Antwerp, those guys were nuts. I was there in Stockholm with them. They were louder than anybody, and it's not in their country by any means. They had the hugest fan base, and because they're international, they get fans from all over. any of kind of some of the regions that the players. I mean, Nico's fan base alone is just ridiculous, right? M0nesy is going to be bringing in that CIS influence. It's like, generally speaking, I think the crowd's going to be fine. Obviously, you've got to kind of follow the other suit. Is that Blast and ESL are direct competitors. Everybody knows this. They're the best of the best and the biggest beast. Blast have to beat them. They know this. ESL are teeing this up to be the best major to ever be. Like, no comparisons. They've set it up perfectly. Everything from fans to the teams to the crowds to the location, everything is set up for this being the best major to ever be, right? So Blast, to the direct competitor who are directly following ESL, they have to beat them. So they're going to do everything in their power, which is why, of course, as you guys already mentioned, kind of bringing on, having a direct involvement with the president is huge, because it kind of changes this concept around esports and this thought process, that lot of things. You know, you speak to the generation above us, for example, and if you were to tell kind of, your parents or, a family member, a distant family member, oh, yeah, I'm a professional esports commentator or I'm a professional esports player, they just think like you're some fat guy in your mum's basement who just eats Doritos and drinks Mountain Dew. Like, that's not how it is anymore. Like, you see people like, simple earning like 30, 40 million a year easily. And these guys living in huge mansions. Like, it's a completely different philosophy now. So we're bringing on kind of the president. It changes the just generally how things work. And also on the other side, what you mentioned about Frog, about the French speaking. So that's called the two-ban law, basically. And it means that in French arenas, they have to speak French, but it doesn't mean everything has to be in French. I think it's going to be in English. I think the one thing that they'll get around it, how they will do it, which apparently has been done in the past, but I don't know. I haven't seen it myself. But they host in French. So instead of having James Banks, for example, bringing on, it'll be like, instead of saying like welcome phase, it'll be like bienvenue phase or whatever, and then blah, 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 they come on, whatever. It's not like that, essentially. So I think the hosting will be in French, but the casting will be in English, because like Blast aren't dumb. They know it has to be in English. They know all the best and biggest talent are English speaking. They know that's what the majority of people watch. It's the common denominator of a language in Europe where everyone speaks it. I mean, in Europe and generally speaking the world, French isn't the most dominant language. So they want to go to the common denominator. They want to reach out to the most people. They'll do it in English. I'm pretty sure. Or if they don't, it might make it a bit tough. But I think generally for me, it's a bit of a dub. Like, I think Blast have arguably one of the best productions ever in the world. I mean, they're really up there. It's like them or ESL in terms of the best production. I mean, We Play, you could probably even make an argument for them, but not at that level just yet. But Blast, one of the best productions. There's also a massive caveat, which is awesome, because it means we don't have to use Blast's shit system. We have to follow the Buchholz law. So the Buchholz systems, we actually do Valve's system, which is great. We don't have to follow Blast's terrible system, which is perfect, because it means we can actually have a competent system of CSGO getting through, which is amazing. You mentioned Skriv, like the Eurostar for us is easy in England. Love to see it. I mean, literally, it's like, I think last time I took the Eurostar, I went to Brussels and it was 40 quid return. I mean, that is beautiful. Yeah. Like, love to see it. Paris is sick as well. I mean, I've been there a lot of times. The city's awesome. It's really like involved as well. It's like everything's super central. So like the arena's not going to be like really out there, which I think, like, I remember when I was in Stockholm, the Avicii arena like isn't actually in the city. It's like across a bridge. It's like kind of not really in the main thing, which is quite nice. And yeah, there's the other things, the following up from ESL, but like also PGL had their big upsets. They had their audio engineer who was deaf, unfortunately, so he struggled a little bit. But no, in the grand scheme, I think it's a really big plus. I think Blast have arguably the best production in the world. If we're going to follow anything like Lisbon as well, which was arguably one of the most insane arena things we've seen in the last 3-4 years, kind of thing. I reckon it's going to be all around positive. And just because ESL are going to have to force them to step it up a level, even more so, which then sets a benchmark for future majors. I mean, anyone who has to follow those two, like, rest in peace. I mean, there was conversations of Perfect World following it. They have got the most mammoth task to follow the two best TOs in the world, basically.
Wait. I saw Frog raise his hand up if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I just wanted to disagree with AnThran regarding the whole nationality thing, because Stockholm, yeah, sure, NIP did well, but that was out of nowhere. Let's be honest. Like, no one was expecting NIP to win the whole thing or to even make quarters, if we're honest.
That makes it even better.
Sure, but the hype was not about, ooh, the Swedish team is here, right? The hype was just, it's the first major back, let's go.
Yeah.
Antwerp had nothing like that. It was just, oh, cool, another major, right? Like, obviously now it's going to be, you can draw a contrast with the fact that hopefully there's going to be a lot of Brazilian teams and hopefully they all do well in Rio. But I don't think the Paris major needs a French team doing that amazingly. I'll agree with you. Like French CS is in a weird spot. Vitality not being full French anymore kind of sucks a little bit. And when you then look down to the second and third best teams, right? Like Heat, Falcons, even LDLC, they're not there, right? Like at best they'll be kind of like within the top 30, maybe they break in top 20. That's it. But yeah, I don't think that that's going to be a factor. I think it's going to be a hype major. Neokai mentioned the G2 fans. There's probably still some old G2 fans that still think Kenny
sure.
S is on the team, and they're just going to go crazy in the crowd.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be hype either way. I don't know. I'm just super excited for it.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next topic because we got
never mind.
No, we gotta move on. No
I didn't even
more.
have a contrarian point,
No.
bro.
No. We gotta move on. All right, and that last topic on this buy round is the ESL Pro League. We'll be hitting on the Group B because Group A happened a while ago. Group B, G2 won convincingly over this bracket, and FaZe got second than outsiders. And it's big MIBR and FTW didn't qualify. So we'll start it off with Skriv. How would you so far? How would you like any takes you would say on Group B and ESL Pro League so far?
I think the obvious one is kind of G2 coming first has really overblown an awful lot of the story behind them, whether this team's going to work out. The only really challenging team for them in this group was FaZe. They did indeed have a decent innings. Maybe you could argue outsiders, but I still think that they're figuring out their feet against the higher end teams with these newer additions. So that's one of the big things that I've seen all over socials, and we've talked about G2 and how great they are and everything, but they also have indeed that big following, which means that they have a lot of kind of smoke blowers. And the narrative on this is like Reddit and Twitter level narrative, but all the same, it went from Huxey's going to destroy this team to Huxey's goated, and all this because they haven't lost a game with him yet. And I saw I don't want to call them out too hard because I think they do some good work, but Play GG, they do a few, like news things and like NATO, Safix does some guides for them and stuff like that. And I saw they on their Twitter posted here's m0nesy's stats before Huxey and here they are after, and obviously they're better afterwards. But it's like they've only had a handful of games, guys, and some of the teams allows m0nesy to just sort of farm away and all this. So yeah, I think that's one of the big things for me that's come out of this is G2 perhaps a bit overblown. Give me the playoffs, same sort of vibe. I'll save it, but same sort of vibe with Vitality as well. EPL group stages. Yeah, go ahead.
You can hit on Group A if you want to bring it up as well.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, they're the two teams across both the groups, right? That have not necessarily overperformed, but people have taken their performance and extrapolated it into, their now top 5, top 3 teams or whatever. Sort of what it feels like anyway. And yeah, I don't really agree with that at this point. To stick with Group B, because I guess we'll let everyone sort of chime in on Group B and everything. Big, really disappointed, to be honest. They seem to be losing their feet a little bit. Not really bringing it to, outsiders is kind of the game there that's maybe a bit of a challenge, could get over. G2 and then FaZe are the ones that you expect them to lose, but they don't really bring all that much of a game. And then even in their wins, they're also dropping maps. So yeah, I think unfortunately for Mr. Snake, of course, who loves this team, I think something big's got to shift, and that's a pun I didn't mean to make. But something does have to really change in that squad. Can't just keep rotating around. MIBR and for the win, kind of going how I would expect. MIBR maybe a map off of someone else. The map off FaZe is a bit wacky, I guess. I don't know how they managed to pull that one off, so that's kind of fair. And then outsiders. Actually performing, I thought that they would get upset by one of those lower teams or indeed maybe lose to big. So the fact that outsiders make it in, it's not a massive surprise, but I think is fair play to them.
All right, we'll go to Frog. You can hit on both because we'll group the ones that are kind of done, Group A and Group B, and then we'll go preview Group C in the next question. So I'll let you start with Group A and Group B.
No, same really with Group B. I feel like G2 and Vitality to an extent. I'm taking it with a grain of salt. It's really nice to see them perform the way they have so far, but I'm not convinced that best teams in the world. It's kind of weird to see both FaZe and NAVI stumble a little bit. Like both weren't looking bad by any means, but they weren't looking as dominant as they have over the last few months. I can't really pinpoint why. It's a little strange to see that. with Group B specifically, I really thought Big would make it through. You know, I'm really liking this change with them bringing Keto back in. It's really unfortunate. Honestly, it's heartbreaking to see Big struggle in that sense, just because they have all the best German players, right? There are no upgrades now, essentially. You know, their academy team is chock full of really young, talented players, and they're probably the best in the country now. But like, where do you go from here, right? You have Tabson, you have Gobby, you have Surson, who's by far like the best. It's just like, if this is not going to work, what do you do? They've gone international so many times in the past, and I'm not saying they have to make a roster move immediately. Obviously, give it time, but it's just a little disheartening to see them try time and time again, and it just doesn't click when it needs to. You know, it's just super heartbreaking. I was honestly sort of surprised with how well Fnatic did over in Group A. I expected it to either be them or Spirit, because both have looked pretty good recently. And I really am a big fan of the changes within Fnatic. So to see them doing so well is kind of surprising, because I expected them to maybe come in third or something like that. But you know, props to them. They're really hitting their mark so far. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of it, really. I wasn't really expecting anything from For the Win. You know, hoping maybe they like get a one map or something like that against a good team. But realistically, I think the groups have kind of just gone the way you'd think. It's just the third, fourth place teams that you know, could have been outsiders, could have been Big, could have been Spirit, could have been Fnatic, right? But
I'm indifferent on Group A. I'm very indifferent on Group A. I honestly don't think NAVI should have made it through. I don't think they deserve to make it through. I definitely think with NIP taking it over them in the final, like in the final series, they did not deserve to make it through. And there's even an argument I could make about NIP should have even gotten in over NAVI, because if you look at the head-to-head, you compare it with that, there's easily a world where NIP go over NAVI and NAVI fall to fourth place in the group, which I think makes way more sense considering how they performed for the entirety of it. If you look at the teams they beat, they only really beat the teams you would have expected them to beat, and even not more than others than that. Like, they lost, or they beat Fnatic and they beat Spirit. Fnatic, fair play. They looked pretty decent. I'll give that up. But for Spirit, it's like par for the course. It's nothing surprising. And then they lost to, I believe they lost to Endpoint, if I'm not mistaken. They did.
Mhm.
They lost to
Yeah,
Endpoint
Endpoint,
and
sure.
NIP. Like, that's just how can they make it through to playoffs in that, when I could argue NIP were punching up the whole time and still looked better than them while doing it. Now, that's my only hot take on Group A. I think everything else went about the way it should have. Vitality, they kind of surprised me. I didn't expect to see them go 5-0. So it's a very welcome surprise. I kind of want to see them in good form again. My point still stands from earlier, though. But for Fnatic, same thing goes. I expected them to make it with how, like, kind of top heavy this group felt, at least with how Fnatic have been rising. I'm not shocked to see them make it through. I'm surprised to see them make it through in second place, but I mean, I guess that's only because everybody else did so poorly. On to Group B, I absolutely loved seeing G2 here. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room is that it wasn't a very good group. Like, you expected G2 and FaZe to make it through, and the third spot was pretty much in contention by outsiders and Big, in which Frog already hinted on the fact that Big really underperformed in this event. Now, the thing I liked about watching G2 was that I don't know, I think it was the last time I was on the show, I called this out. I said, I don't think there's a reason to drop Hooksy. His individual performance in Blast was absolutely horrendous and atrocious, but I also said that you can't cut him. He's never had a wake-up call like this, and it's not fair to, like, give him this wake-up call and then not give him a chance to try to respond on that, which he did. He drastically performed better in this event, albeit again against somewhat weaker teams, but he did well against teams like FaZe. He did well against teams like Outsiders, and he put up a pretty respectable stat line in the entire event and showed consistency throughout it all, which is a really good outlook for G2, considering now, obviously, as Skriv said earlier, it's kind of hard considering there's not too much to go off of them, but some of the individuals look better. He looks better. G2 looks a bit more comfortable. They're taking good maps off of good teams. I think this is a really promising G2 and one of the most promising we've ever seen if they're able to keep this up. Other than that, very weak group. I'm with Frog that Big were kind of meh, and I don't know if they need a roster change or whatnot, but what's their identity at this point? Like, they have so long been trying to, like, create this really good team. They've been in and out of the top 10, top 15. They've never been able to consistently stick there. I think I'm with Skriv, something big has to change, because you can't keep just rinse and repeating this. You can't keep saying, okay, well, we need to give them more time, because I feel like rarely do they make these big, like, roster shifts, and they never work. They might pump out a good event or two here or there, but it's always them pretty much falling behind the pack. If making it deeper into events, it's by the skin of their teeth and then losing in the first round of playoffs. it can't keep standing. If Big want to actually start contending for world titles, which, I mean, at this rate, they literally never will. Give them time or not, they will never make the top 5.
All right, Neoke, finish it off, then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Group B from the bottom up, because it's kind of the talking points. So FTW, I think people actually don't really understand the story of FTW, which is actually, I actually feel bad for them. I was there at a conference on the desk when they got through, and I think everyone seems to, like, this team is shit. They don't deserve to be here. How they even got here? But people don't realize that their 2 best players of Jerks and Story got poached by Saw right before this event. They qualified literally off the back of Jerks and Story. I mean, the performances that those 2 put up, tooth and nail, drag this team to success, is kind of the story of FTW. The first ever Portuguese team to qualify for Pro League. It was like this heartwarming story. But they lost their 2 best players to Saw, because when Saw, with the buckets of money they've got, when they come knocking, you can't say no. They're arguably kind of top 2 with Movistar in the Iberian region in terms of kind of big prestige organizations. They can't say no to that. And of course, off the back of those 2 have now qualified for the RMR. So fair play. But I think this is like an FTW side who have made, 2 drastic roster changes in like a month. Lost their 2 best players in the last month, and I've now brought in, I'm not being funny, Dodo, he's past his prime. He's not that guy anymore. He's not the person who's going to carry FTW to glory. They just need a full reset. So I think people kind of like wrongfully shit on them in the terms of this is just, it's a roster that's all over the place. MIBR, same thing. I think they lost their best player, right? Cello he was the guy. He's the IGL, he was the impact fragger, he was the hero rifle. He literally did all of the main roles. He played IGL, he played every hero position. He was the rifle who got the best stats. He was MIBR's crux, essentially. And the fact that, it now gone to Imperial, fair enough, very good decision for him. But MIBR lost their best player, and they lost everything that kind of like was the identity to MIBR. He was this fresh caller who brought this kind of nuance to MIBR, made them this kind of team that could compete for Brazilian CS. But unfortunately, they don't have him anymore, so they're never going to compete for me. I'm actually, though, not surprised in the slightest that Big didn't make it. When I looked at this group, I'm glad that outsiders are finally getting the respect that they deserve. Fame and Norbert in Tier 2 were 2 of the most promising players for a long time, especially Fame. Fame has been grafting, putting up like stupidly good stats. There was a point in time where Fame was averaging a 1.32 or something stupid like that over the case of like 6 months. Like, those 2 have been grafting it out. They deserve the Tier 1 opportunity. They finally kind of plugged the holes. I mean, filling the boots of your Kindle is always going to be tough. Like, there's no questions asked. But these 2 have come in. They found stability in this roster. Outsiders actually look very, very promising now. Where for Big, for a long time, I know Maui Snake loves them, and he's a lovely dude, but I can't back him on this one. I just don't think Big are that promising. I like the playstyle they tried to go for, but I think it's always very concerning when you're relying on the 73-year-old of Tabson to drag them across the line and put up these monster performances. That's always, for me, going to be the biggest worry, where you're like, okay, a couple of questions need to be asked here. You spoke about kind of Germans who could be brought in as well. Frog, I think you mentioned it. The only one that I can think of that's outside of, bear in mind, the Academy, I think, are awesome. I really, really like this side. The only person I can think of that's even in the last kind of, few months competed in the Tier 2, Tier 1.5 is Spiddy, who left Sprout. It's the only guy I can think of that potentially could add to him, but he even wasn't great on Sprout. Let's not beat around the bush there. So, I don't know. It's very tough. Or maybe they could kind of poach the 2 German guys from Koana. I don't know. The changes need to be made, but I don't really know where Big even go, because I can't really think, apart from the Academy side, of who they bring up. And then, G2 and FaZe. I think Hooksy, it's very early doors, as Skriv mentioned, but he's getting some respect. I was scrolling back for a chat that I had with a mate from but it was like on the 29th of the 7th, and I was saying, like, give him time and Hooksy will be fine. Because you got to remember as well, Hooksy dragged a pretty mid Copenhagen Flame side to top 8 of the major. Like, you've got to remember that he knows his shit. Like, he knows what he's doing. I had a chat with Devorborg, and I know him pretty well, and I was speaking to him, and he was like, Hooksy is the guy that you should focus on in Tier 1. He's the one who, like, of course, you got these youngsters like Zyph and the Yabi who are insane. Nikodos, who's just an absolute talent. Roy, who was obviously the hard carry. But Hooksy's the one who made those kind of, puzzle pieces come together, and he's doing exactly the same in G2. He's actually bringing them back down to earth a little bit, not allowing them to be very sporadic. I think they were very much all over the place at times. They're kind of heavily reliant on individuals stepping up. Everyone keeps saying, oh, Nico's not performing well enough. He's not carrying well enough. But that's not what makes a good team. You can't be relying on individuals to pop off. I mean, you kind of seeing this at NAVI now. In as simple as having a little bit of a slower performance, generally speaking. He's not dropping like a 1.5 every game, and they're struggling a little bit. So I think overall, it's good to see kind of Hooksy and G2 actually playing pretty well. FaZe, I don't think they're going to be too, phased about this, to be perfectly honest. It's fine. They'll make it through. just to touch on Group A, I think upset of the year, endpoint taken and down NAVI. I mean, what a game.
Yeah.
The only upset of the year that I think can even challenge that is that Melbourne wings up just dominating OG. You know, that's the only one that I can think competes with that. But I don't know. I'm pretty concerned about NAVI. I think just on a side note, this sets things up pretty cool for the major in terms of, you know, you look towards Stockholm, it was only ever going to be NAVI winning that. Like, you know, nobody thought otherwise. I think most of us walked away with diamond coins there because it was pretty clear that NAVI were going to farm that one. Antwerp, it was only between two, to be perfectly honest. And it was like, you know, most people kind of had a good idea, you know, FaZe or NAVI. But this one, I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's like that one outlier anymore. NAVI aren't this unbelievably scary team that you can't touch. FaZe, people are starting to figure them out a little bit. Is that going to be a problem? And it's opened up the doors for teams to come through and cause a couple of problems. So I'm quite excited. I think it's setting things up quite nicely for the future, where it actually makes Rio even more exciting because it's hard to call. But yeah, I think generally speaking, pretty good. I'm glad to see outsiders get through. I don't know how far they'll go forward, but I think the Fame and Norbert pickup are huge. I'm big fans.
All right, we're gonna have the last question because before we kind of like eliminate a guy for points, but he'll still be on the show. Who's gonna be topping Group C? The Group C is ENCE, Heroic, Astralis, Mouse, Complexity, Heat.
I think I can accurately predict this group in its entirety.
All right, go to the top three.
How could you even
top to bottom?
Here we go.
Just
top
do
to
your
bottom.
predictions. Don't
Top to
explain your
bottom.
predictions.
Yeah.
All right.
So
This is gonna be
these are
clips.
all very whack-ass teams, let's be honest. But I think if there's
Whoa.
any team that is going to be at the top of it by a long shot, it is Heroic. I could very
Okay.
easily see them in first place. So damn free. Then besides that, after the performance we saw at Blast, sure, it was a bit of a bad exit, but I still think second place easily goes to Astralis. Beyond that, it's probably up for grabs, but more so, I think it's going to be Mouse. Because Complexity aren't that great. Heat, I think they have big consistency issues and never are really there to take teams off or take games and maps off of tier 1. For ENCE, they just lost their best couple of players. And they really rode those guys to find success that was already not that convincing in my eyes. I don't think they're going to do well. I think without them, they're going to flop. So I think in order, this group goes Heroic, Astralis, Mouse, ENCE, Complexity, Heat. I think that's how it goes.
Skriv?
I'd have to disagree. I think ENCE, it's not. We could maybe give it down to slip of the tongue away. It's not couple players. Hades was one of the most like inconsistent players on the circuit, especially for a team
Spinks?
that at one point of the year. Yeah, Spinks is the one, but that's why I'm being nitpicky.
Yeah,
he
the
did
couple
say
of players.
players.
Okay, fine.
So I understand. Yeah, Spinks is a big one. It's going to be a shift for the ENCE team. However, I feel like some Pius is a much better fit for the squad. You got Snappy, much more of a mid-round caller, right? Wants someone who's aggressive. Some Pius is vocal. Valde's very, very vocal, and spoke to him recently, and he said all about Danish comms and how good they are. So I actually think, for me, ENCE tops the group if we're doing full sends, not just who's coming top 3, who's coming bottom 3. Then this is where I think it's a lot more open. Now Heroic, they for me it's like the Yabi edition. They had him at Cologne. It's not really lived up. Okay, and this kind of goes, this is a really sick, I wanted to throw it in when we were talking about Hooksy, but this is a really sick Alan Hender take, okay? I got to give it to him because he said
Alan
it to
Hender.
me while we were on, while we were on like the breaks and stuff on our cast today. But here's the deal. If Yabi and if Roy and Nikodos and if Hooksy are all good moves, why were Copenhagen Flames not a consistent top 10 team?
There we go.
Right,
Exactly.
and they only made
were.
so there's got to be they made runs.
They were there for like
at the
3
majors
weeks and then would drop out.
and then,
like
yeah,
What do
exactly.
you mean? They literally, after they made that run at the major, they performed well at every event they went to.
No, online
but-
they were crap.
Yeah, no, but they were never a top 10 consistent team. They'd have
Yeah.
like these 3-4 week
Since when?
stints.
Hold up. No. Back up. Since when is being a good online team a good thing?
Well, when it's the vast
CSGO.
majority of their like follow-up events.
What do you mean CSGO? Every
How do you,
time we
okay,
talk about
AnThran,
it.
how do you qualify for the major? Tell me.
Every
what is it?
time Every time we
have they
talk
got
about a
4,000
team-
teams
no,
on
no, no,
LAN? No, they
no,
haven't.
no,
It's
no,
an
no,
online
no, no, no.
qualifier. You
Every
moron.
single time.
Everyone is online. It's just
Every
that-
single time one of those online teams qualifies for a fucking LAN event, all anybody says is, "Oh, they're just online. Are they going to perform on LAN?" And now you're using it against them. You got to pick battles.
No.
here, man.
Well,
Doesn't
make
they had a
sense.
serious kind of. And look, we can talk about circumstance with complexity, and but they weren't. And the thing is, as well, it was just at the majors, right? And that, I guess at the RMRs that came prior to them, that they'd perform well, and they performed really well at Stockholm. They performed decently at Antwerp, right? They didn't necessarily overperform. And indeed, yeah, the online stuff, it does matter, especially when they were like coming bottom of ECL seasons and stuff.
Yeah.
There is a difference between, damn, dude, they're maybe looking forward to their next LAN or whatever, but they seriously did like vastly underperform where we'd expect them to be online. Even like prior to the Stockholm major, when they were looking good online, their form dipped like massively in comparison. But look, on to Group C, okay? So I feel like there's got to be a move. The point I'm trying to make, there's got to be a move in there that's not good. And I think Yabi might be it, unfortunately. It doesn't really seem to have worked. I think that Heroic, if we're talking about onliners, they had a fantastic, online time. It's not really translated. The past few offline events for them have looked a bit flat. They've not really done as well. So I feel like Heroic, this could be the tournament. This would be a classic Heroic tournament to do it in as well. A sort of group stage where there's a couple games that they should be getting, and there's a few challenges, but it's not like it's the best teams in the world. So this is why I think this group's actually really hard to predict. You got Astralis, who's on a good run of form. You got Mouse, who have got the nice little honeymoon kind of period, right, where they've added a few new players, and I think it is the move to go towards. I think it's going to go ENCE, Astralis, Heroic, Mouse, Heat, Complexity. That would be my full send in terms of, but in that mid table, there is a lot of room for upset.
Skriv,
to be
I'm
honest,
not going to make a long point. I just want to say, Skriv, I will personally bet you $20 that that Heroic will beat ENCE. I will personally bet you $20. Your game?
Sure.
In the books, baby. Freest $20 in my
All right,
life.
Frog,
man.
you can go next because we have to
All
move
right.
on to the buy or save rounds next.
So for me, the C in Group C stands for copium, right? I'm full huffing. I'm gonna double down with Mouse topping the group, right? I've been an NXT fan since that roster was made. The fact that it's pretty much all together again, the main pieces are back together. I'm just, I'm a Xertian fanboy. I'm gonna admit it now. I think this team has a lot of potential. It finally has the right pieces. It's finally, there's no longer one inconsistent piece there. Sure, there's still Dexter's calling this, a little touchy, but I think in terms of just the firepower is finally there. I'm just going to go all in. Mouse are going to surprise everyone. Somehow they top the group. Second place I'm going to go with. Second place I'm going to go with Heroic because I think they probably will still be the most consistent. I think Yabi was probably a good pickup in place of Refresh, if I'm completely honest. And I think generally this team should do quite well now that he's had a bit more time to settle in. Third place is where I'm a little bit more unsure, but because I said copium, I'm going to go copium again and go with complexity. I think this team is actually going to look a lot better now. I know. Take them seriously.
Can we remove points for that?
That's got to be a hard negative point.
I know. Look,
we're all agreeing on this, bro. I lost a point for asking him who's in Paris, and he gets away with that.
No, don't worry.
Thank you.
No, I seriously think complexity will surprise people. Like, okay, sure, top 3 is probably exaggerating, but I don't think they're going to be bottom of the group as everyone thinks.
That I can go with.
And ENCE, I agree, they're gonna look okay. Sunpies in a way should be an upgrade over Hades down, like, moving forward. I do really feel like Valde for Sphinx is not a good 1-for-1 if I'm completely honest, but like altogether this team should be okay. It'll take a bit of time to reinvent themselves. I don't see them having like an insane honeymoon out of nowhere. And Heat, while I like Jax coming in, I just they're always going to be a decent tier 2 team. I just don't see them topping this group. I don't see them doing that much damage. Like, yeah, sure, they might beat complexity or vice versa. They might get an upset over like ENCE or something like that. But I just don't think they're going to do insanely well in this group.
Cool. And I guess I'll follow up on that. I think for me, I'm sort of somewhat similar to Skriv in the terms of like I think ENCE will top it out, and I know kind of you were making your point, AnThran, about some players, but it's like for me, yes, they lost 2 players, but one that there's only one we care about, of course, the Vitality. But people keep forgetting how good Sumpai's actually was. He took Movistar Riders to the 6th best team in the world. I think like that is really overshadowed a lot. And of course, it was a pretty team performance, to be perfectly honest, but Sumpai's was the linchpin behind a lot of their success. He's so good at mid-run calling. He's very, very good with the AWP. They needed just an injection of someone fresh and young. And if you're looking at kind of any AWPer from kind of tier 1.5 upwards of who can compete in this space and farm in this space as well, Sumpai's was up there. I mean, he was putting up some ridiculous stats with Movistar Riders when he had to drag some of them through some thick sludge of bad performances. There were times where Sumpai's is dropping like just disgustingly good performances to give them even a map, right? So for me, I just feel like this should top the group out because of the other crux that you mentioned, Skriv, about Heroic. I'm not like massively impressed with them like so far. I just feel like I think Yabi has one of the highest skill ceilings of kind of anyone out of that Scandinavian scene. I mean, he's so talented. I think you really can bring a ridiculous kind of a level to Heroic, but they haven't found it yet. I'm still not fully sure about Heroic finding their form. I think the change of refresh was good, but Yabi so far, it doesn't seem like he's gelled properly around the rest of them. I still feel like not there's a missing piece, but like a missing, I guess we use that word, identity. They still haven't found that Heroic that, you look towards the online era, they were dominant, or even back in kind of the, Pinnacle Cup, for example, the Pinnacle Cup Championship, when they beat Astralis, right? It was like, it was Heroic putting up good performances, maybe in a bit of a honeymoon, but for me, I still think they're a little bit inconsistent, but because the group's kind of meh, they'll probably get 2nd place. And then for me, the 3rd place is quite interesting because you've got Astralis who took 4 attempts to get through the RMR. Granted, it is online, so, different scenario. They had people like, what were they called? Like Battenberg Blasters from the German advanced team who were like taken to double OT on Overpass. Like those kind of games that you get worried, or Los Kagutos beating them in that 3rd RMR. You get concerned about that. That's online, right? It matters, but they got through in the end. But Astralis, they're still pretty weak. Like Farley has been inconsistent. Zipnex, I mean, buddy, fella. It's time to hang up the Zimmer frame. Let's call it a day, mate. Like it's been a good run, but they need to inject some youthfulness into this side because they've got the right ideas there, but Zipnex is not the guy who you need. I mean, I know he's got experience. I know he's not phased by much. I know he's got all the knowledge you need, but he's not pulling up the stats. He's not pulling it in game. I think Astralis are looking considerably weaker than they ever have before. I think, when Dev1ce eventually joins back, it is going to happen. We all know it is. When he eventually joins back, this team does become something special again. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But I think for me, as much as the milquetoast is of kind of ENCE Heroic Astralis, that seems like for me like the most logical. The only reason I don't go in favor of MOUs, even though I really, really like this MOUs side, is that they are just still quite experienced. I mean, like the average age went from being like 26 to like 21, with like Torzi, JDC, and Xerxin all being like 19 and 20 years old. So I think in the grand scape, they're not that experienced. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think it's just that, sometimes these young guys takes a little bit of time to gel. I think it's very early doors to make a really confident call in my eyes on MOUs, even though I really like the Academy boys. And I followed the We Play Academy League since season 1. I only want to think that if there's going to be an upset, it would be Heat, because as much as people don't like Heat, I really like Heat. I think they're a fun team. I think they're really interesting. I think they have this kind of this imprint of French CS from way back when, like 2016 kind of imprint of CS, and they're sort of bringing it back into play. I think, for me, you got people saying like Afro has been silently brilliant for a long, long time, and people keep forgetting his name, but if you look at the stats and look at the performances, and if anyone wants to just go and see what Afro can do, go and watch him at conference. He was brilliant, like genuinely one of the best AWPers in the entire tournament. Bear in mind, there's some big names at conference. He was stunning. And they had that French derby at the end where they took down Falcons. I mean, Afro can bring it. Jocko as well, as a support player, is nothing short of brilliant. And he can core really well. I think for me, this team is impressive. And then if they can balance off the back of the experience of Jax, I think he potentially could cause an upset. It would be such a wild card, but if I'm not going to go milquetoast, maybe Heat sneak a 3rd. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't see Complexity doing anything, to be perfectly honest. I don't think Horzerk's the saving grace to that team. I don't really, as much as I don't like giving him like the platform or quoting him, I know Smooya said He like listed like 15 AWPers that he thought were better, and off the back of his like 15, I kind of agreed with like 5 of them that are better than Horswick. But it's more of a role player, so I can kind of understand. But I don't think he's going to be the saving grace. It's going to push complexity back into the forefront of the conversation, get them into a deep run in playoffs. That I don't see that happening. I don't feel like he's the firepower. So I'm going to go Ents, Heroic, and then it's between Astralis or Heat for me for that third place. That's my rogue call. That Heat maybe sneak a third and they cause an upset. But if I'm going to go milquetoast, I just go Astralis.
All right, we got to move. We got to move on because we got to go to the buyer save rounds. But we're going to do a quick points on Group D really fast. Who's winning it? AnThran. Group D is
Group D.
Yes, we got to move on.
Winning it by like, do you mean like top 3 or just number 1?
Top three.
Top 3 is probably easily Cloud9, Liquid, Furia. Furia haven't been looking that great. Looking that great is maybe a bit of an understatement, but I feel like they've been inconsistent in recent memory. Liquid have been like killing it and showing a lot of signs of promise with Yekindar on the roster. And obviously Cloud9's Cloud9. They're always that consistent team. They've always been looking at least good enough to take games off of teams like they're playing against. And then EG, Eternal Fire, Movie Star without their star players, 2 Mega Lol.
All right. I think like this group kind of just sucks. I think everyone's gonna say the same shit. Let's say who's gonna top the group, because I think everyone says Liquid, Furia, Cloud9. Am I general consensus? Is that correct of everyone?
The only thing is who tops it between C9 and Liquid for me. Just
okay,
because...
wait, 1 second. For the big three. The big 3, we have the general consensus. Is that the 3?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll go to the who's
maybe
topping
EG.
it.
But
Minus that.
No. He's memeing, bro. I'll back Skriv. He gets the end.
Absolute fake.
It was there. I had to take it.
Kneeling off saving grace.
I think the question between Cloud9 and Liquid just comes down to what happens on the day, because I honestly could see a world where either one of those teams take it. It depends on what Cloud9 we see. It depends on what Liquid we see. I mean, there have been signs of both where Cloud9 implode. They don't look good in a map. They lose a series they definitely shouldn't have lost. Individuals don't show up and they just never get anything going. But the same can be said for Liquid, right? I literally think it depends on who comes out the gate first, who looks better on the day, because it's an honest to God toss up. Like, I think you can run that game 10 times and it'll be 5 different outcomes.
We got AnThran and NeoK are kind of safe for this next round, so you guys are good for the advance. We gotta finish off the last between Skriv. Said something stupid with EG. You gotta minus the point there.
I was joking.
Let me give him my NA power. Come on. I gave him my pass.
Now we're gonna finish it off between Skriv and Frog. Who gets the advance here? We'll see on the last stand on Group D. We can give us a good intake. We'll give a point before you got to advance.
What? Who's just on the top 1, or?
We're saying anything insightful in Group D.
Well, I don't know. I was just kind of going to say, I think actually Liquid will probably clean up here, to be honest. I think Yekindar's going to farm. Yeah, I don't know. Furia, maybe they come out and surprise some people. I'm kind of agreeing with AnThran that Cloud9 are sort of flat when it comes to the LAN. They've always been a bit, weird and not massively disappointing, but there seems to be a level. I definitely think they'll qualify, right? Don't get me wrong, but I think they will maybe struggle against the stronger field of competition, and they might drop a map or 2 against a Movistar or an Eternal Fire, but not EG. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely feeling that Liquid are going to top it, and I think Liquid are going to clean up. I'll put some money where my mouth is. I reckon Liquid will go clean through and maybe only drop a couple maps. I don't think they'll lose a series.
Yeah, honestly, I think this is C9's map, or C9's group to lose, right? They should be the favorites, given who they are, but I don't know. They've looked a little flat. They're 11th in the world now. And I know, that's off of some sort of weird HLTV rankings for the past few months, but like realistically, they kind of disappear when they shouldn't. And as much as I know Liquid choke meme, haha, I actually feel like Liquid have only gotten better with Yekindar. Provided this, is the roster moving forward, I actually think that Liquid might actually top this group. It'll probably be close, but I really think that Liquid win this over C9. And then yeah, obviously Furia just coming in third. They should anyways.
Okay, so just to add something, I know I'm not in this kind of argument of points. The only thing that I think is the big talking point here is between obviously Liquid and C9 of who tops the group. But I think a lot of people are going to forget that C9 haven't played an official since Cologne play-ins. Like it has been a long time, or since Cologne even, may I say, where they finished kind of 9th, 12th. They've not played official because they're not a Blast partner team. They haven't been playing for a long time. Where Liquid have had officials under their belt for a long time. They've got reps in EU. They've got reps against top tier teams where we haven't seen. What was the last time we saw them play? Basically, 2 months ago, essentially, was the last time we saw them play.
And who did they lose to?
And they lost to Liquid. So you got to remember that, not only did C9 lose to Liquid, that was 2 months ago. C9 haven't then played an official in 2 months. So I know that, some people, they've been hard scrimming or whatever, but they have not been playing for a long time, which for me surely it has to be Liquid, just for the fact that, they have experience. I know that the team choked Liquid or whatever, but, Kindle's been picking up and they've got reps under their belt. Surely that's enough to carry NACS for once.
All right, guys, we're gonna move on. We're not gonna eliminate anyone here.
No.
One sec.
I earned to
Hey,
not be eliminated last. That shit's not gonna fly. All right.
No,
Rock, paper, scissors. Right the fuck now to see who's out.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. But now,
heads or tails? Who's calling?
We are gonna do these buy or save questions. 2 will be eliminated though, because the clutch round is going.
Okay.
What the fuck, man? That's
Yes, I'm being nice. All right.
being nice. If it was me there, you would say I'm out.
No. I gave you 21 points, motherfucker. You said Liquid. I gave you a point for that. You're second place.
I was at 21. I asked Prague a question earlier and lost the point.
All right, you're fine for now. All right, these are one response questions, buy or save. Buy is you agree with the statement, you agree with it. Save, we change it to save. That's you disagree. So it's like buy or sell. Now, when I say a question, you say you buy it, and then you give a response, get the points. We'll move it on to the next guy. First one, we're gonna give it to the guys with the low points. We're gonna give the Skriv first. First one on the buy and save. HLTV rankings just came out. Obviously, it's FaZe and NAVI are 1 and 2. But is Liquid a top 3 team at the moment? Do you buy or save it?
I'm a save on this one, guy. I think that they can be a solid team, but definitely not at the moment. To be honest, the quick spin on the whole ranking thing is it's been a bit weird. There's been some retroactive points added in. As Neokai's kind of touched on, we got a few of the Blast teams, right? The format's one thing. The other thing is you can really play with the system a little bit, especially at these months of the year, post-player break, So yeah, I think that Liquid have kind of benefited from that a wee bit. So on a quick, I don't think they're a top 3 team in the world yet. But maybe my crazy take is that in time, perhaps they could get back there. I think they're going to get close. By the end of the year, I think they're going to get close. I reckon I could see them finding a top 4 at the major. Not guaranteed on that, but if this upward trajectory continues, we get some vintage NAF, some vintage Elige, OC's starting to, get a bit more comfortable against the top level teams. I think that this could actually be a really solid roster by the end of the year.
All right, Sfrog.
I'm also just gonna save on this, if I'm honest. I don't know, like. It's just kind of as Skriv has mentioned. It's been weird. Some teams haven't been very active, others have, and because of Blast format, it might give you a few more points than you'd think. I don't think Liquid is top 3 right now, but I don't think there is a very much defined top 3 team. I don't even know if there's a top 2 now, given how kind of shaky both FaZe and NAVI looked. So, I think it's really up in the air. I think Neokai mentioned earlier, right? Like this is kind of anyone's major. There's a lot of teams coming out of this roster shuffle looking really good. So it's kind of anyone's game right now. I think the few events leading up to the major are really going to kind of show where everyone sits. And then we'll see like, yeah, okay, these 2, maybe 3 teams are actually like the best right now. Let's go.
AnThran?
I am a buy. I am 100%
There we
a
go.
buy on this. With how weird it's been in these past couple of days, you come out of the player break, and maybe there was a couple of games Liquid lost they shouldn't have, but at the most part, they did well at Blast. And I think they're in a group to even like more so boost that confidence. Since they had Yekindar in this roster, they've looked extremely good. Any series that they have lost since bringing him in, you run it back, they easily could have won it. The thing is, I think we're looking at this the wrong way. Now, the question for me is, who can't Liquid beat? And right now, I don't think there is a roster other than maybe FaZe that they wouldn't be able to take down with how they've been looking. Now, before they brought in Yekindar, the biggest issue on my mind was consistency, because they had Elige, who was doing good every now and then, but you could still see him. Mentality was destroying him. He wasn't performing well on some maps, and Liquid really missed that consistency at almost every step of the way. I mean, you could have always looked back and saw a fragging disparity or a big issue in that department. Now, with Yekindar, almost every single game dropping big bombs takes that pressure off Elige. It takes that pressure off somebody like NAF, who doesn't need to make star plays anymore, and he's even looked a lot better since Yekindar's come into the roster. Same goes for OC, who's felt more comfortable. You can just see the elevation in every single player since Yekindar's arrival because of that release of pressure, because they don't need to perform now that this kid is. And the same thing goes for him, where he feels comfortable, he gets to ball out every game, and his team is supporting him doing it the whole way. And that's what I really think means or is needed in this top 3 right now. Maybe there's a bit lackluster data, because Vitality could easily be in contention for that spot right now. But with the lackluster amount that we have, like I just said, on them, considering we've only seen them in a couple of games, I think Liquid are most certainly easily contending for that right now, especially with how they've looked.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm full save, but I kind of want to give the arguments of both sides, because there is like a conversation here. The first one, which has to be said, is it's all on kind of matches played. Like, I already mentioned the C9 example. They haven't played in 2 months. Literally, 2 months and 3 days is the last time they played. The teams that are in Blast, they get points because they've been playing officials, where other teams haven't. So, already you have kind of moments of that. And generally speaking, going off HLTV is not the way it should be done. I feel like that conversation is so outdated.
Yeah.
Like, even look at some of the teams in the top 30 now. For example, as much as I love Asian CSGO, Wings Up are not one of the 30th best team in the world. I don't care. A CIS Pug mix would have a good go against them. I know they took on OG, and I like Asian CSGO, and I like Wings Up, but they're not a top 30 team. Or, for example, 9Z. They're like 23rd in the world. They have 4 players. They don't even have a team. They have 4 players. So it doesn't make sense that you're talking about, HLTV rankings. That's the way to go off it. It isn't. It isn't the way to go off it. For me, I feel like that's not the way to look forward. I do think that Liquid, though, they have started to find some form. They were very complacent for a while. I think it was kind of all over the place. Now they're starting to find this form again. Alicia's stepping up. Their core of fraggers, in fact, are stepping up. Yekindar's been putting up these monster performances, which is really, really good to see. I think another guy who was slept on for so long, and I'm glad that he's finally getting the limelight, is OC. He's a stunning AWPer. Like, he's genuinely mechanically very gifted. He was graced by the gods himself. He's very good with the big green. But I don't think they're a top 3, because you look at some of the other sides who are outside of the top 3. G2 are better than them. Vitality are better than them. You could even make arguments for teams like, even some of those others like ENCE and whatnot, potentially having runs where if they do good at EPL, they should surely deserve that spot. I'm not saying they do right now, but they surely deserve the spot if they have a decent runs in EPL. But what I'm saying, generally speaking, you shouldn't go off HSTV rankings, because they're not right. 9Z have 4 players and the 23rd. But I'm a big save, because I don't think they're the 3rd best team. I think Vitality is still better than them. I think G2 are better than them. And as well, like, there's a massive comparison between 1 and 2, even though I know NAVI are being kind of meh at the moment, but it kind of looks like, for the long shot, it's kind of, tier 1 is kind of NAVI and FaZe really steaming above the pack, and then everyone else just clamoring for spots below them, because no one seems to be on a consistent basis keeping up on their tail. They just seem to be a step ahead. So I think 3rd place is just a bit of a shit show anyway, to be honest, because it's just like, who's the best of a bad bunch? But I don't think they're the 3rd best. Is the best way I can put it.
All right, now next question: buy or save? We went on a question last time with Hooksy on G2, and G2 just won like 10 matches in a row, looking pretty good. Kassad says that G2 will not win anything in this current season with this roster. Do you buy or save G2 winning anything in the current season, or with this current roster?
think that's a bad way to format the question. I'm just gonna start that off.
I know.
Like,
It's
Well,
a very
you screw that-
safe. Kassad's
never-
got a very safe take there, bro. It's like
Yeah.
here's like a time window, a little bit specific. I think by win anything, he obviously means like trophies, right? So silverware. I'll
reformat
start
it?
with this.
you can start with it, but I was just wondering if I could reformat the question.
Yeah, if you want.
Do you buy or sell G2 winning? Like, I think that's such a bad way to put it.
Winning what? That's just
winning
an open
events.
question.
Exactly.
Does
G2
Does G2 win events, buy or save?
Okay. I can get behind that.
All right.
So
Started off.
do G2 win events? So we're kind of spinning. We're moving away from Kassad's. Right? Do they win events? I don't buy that. I was going to agree with Kassad basically, right? So
All right.
I save. Yeah, I just think that we're putting a lot of pressure. Okay, you got the big three, the boys, n0nesy, Hunter, and Nico. They're gonna have to do a lot of heavy lifting. I think that HooXi, it's cool. It's the style that they prefer. Nico's gonna have to have these lights out performances like he did at the Stockholm Major, which is already super difficult. They didn't win there. He had to literally like kind of carry his team 4v5 all the way through. You could even maybe argue like 3.5v5 in that event. Probably should have been awarded with like the MVP or whatever, but that's a whole other conversation. I think that HooXi, if we're also visiting that, is this guy, is this roster going to get them anything? I think that he and his numbers, unless he starts getting super comfortable, or if, n0nesy and Nico are hitting insane numbers, I think that his negative numbers will cost them victories, right? And at the tail end of tournaments, a semi-final against FaZe or NAVI, or even a Liquid, right? Or even a Vitality if this form is to continue, or maybe like a Fnatic could possibly contend against them if, it's like HooXi's playing bad and, well, Nico's playing okay, n0nesy's playing pretty, there's a lot of things that need to go right for them to complete a tournament, let's say. So I can kind of get on board with what Kassad is saying, and I don't think that they're going to pick up any silverware with where this team's at. They need so many things to go right, and when they're playing against the top 5 best teams in the world, however that tends to pan out, because we talked about that. Obviously, like there's 1-2. It's not as big a spread as it was, right? This time last year, it looked like these are our 2 best teams. What's going on everywhere else? There's going to be some moves after the major. You got to bear in mind the major was a little bit nearer for Stockholm as well, so they were waiting, etc., etc. So I just feel like they're gonna look good, they're gonna have some decent results and whatnot, but I think that they will get to crunch time and one player sort of half shits the bed, or HooXi even is another consideration, that he gets further into a tournament than he's ever been. And I think that they will see the ground kind of fall out from underneath them against, the best in the world. There's maybe a chance. This is why it's a difficult question as well, because there's maybe a chance that, NAVI or FaZe take out all the competition, then lose their semi-final in some crazy upset against like Furia or something, and then G2, you would expect them to beat Furia. So I got to give myself the little caveat, but if everything goes to plan, they won't be winning anything this season. And I'd say that, for me, is until the end of the year.
Frog?
I agree. I'm saving as well. Although I have to start it off with, what the fuck is Kassad on about? In that he's advocating for JKS to get on this team. I don't remember if he pushed hard for HooXi or not. I don't remember his stance on the whole IGL situation, right? But like, bro, make up your mind. I agree, though. I don't think this roster is going to win things out of the bat. Like, it's possible, kind of as Skriv just said, with, say EPL, right? If it gets a little kooky towards the playoffs and, the favorites are eliminated or something like that, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's them versus another decent team, like, I don't know, like Liquid or something like that, right? Okay, sure. Potentially G2 could win EPL, or, an event leading up to the major, just right after the major, where maybe the top teams are a bit more complacent, maybe they're feeling a bit burnt out, whatever. I mean, they shouldn't have. We just came off a break, but you know, it's possible that they win an event, but I just don't think they're gonna suddenly be like the favorites. I think this roster will be really good, could contend for titles, but it's going to take a bit more time. They're looking better already. I'm gonna give them that, and I think these pickups were good in that sense. But it's just going to take more time. Hooksie's going to need to figure out what the fuck he's doing in terms of fragging before I could even really consider them like, oh yeah, no, now they're looking in winning form. Because if you draw like a comparison to FaZe Clan, sure, Kerrigan doesn't put up huge numbers, but by God, does he fucking make up for it with the fact that he's so experienced and probably the best in-game leader. I'll say it, the best in-game leader of all time in Counterstrike. And he puts in a lot of work. I'm not saying Hooksy doesn't, but he puts in the work to actually like stay on par with most players. I don't see Hooksy doing that yet, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's probably just still settling into the team, and the fact that everyone else is looking much more comfortable than they had is great. But I just don't think they're going to win something immediately unless it is a bit of a, asterisk. Oh yeah, this little condition of like, oh, they just kind of got an upset win over somebody else, and boom, they win some smaller event. But I just don't see them say winning the major or winning like convincingly winning a big event by the major.
I'm a buy. 100% I am a buy on G2. There is no question in my mind that they have what it takes as it stands to perform against the top level. Like, we just saw Hooksy play consistently. Again, your only caveat you've got is that it's a fairly weak group. That doesn't explain him not only carrying up his weight, but doing well and allowing other individuals to do well against FaZe, who we have just toted as one of the two teams. Right now, this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at G2 are looking good. They just beat FaZe in a pretty comfortable fashion 2-0. They just swept the group without really shaving too much hair off of their head. Navi's not looking that great. Vitality's a big question mark. Who's going to stop them? Because it's not realistic anymore to say Navi or FaZe is going to stop them. With how Navi's looking, that is nowhere near as surefire at all, if even close to a guarantee. If you look at FaZe, they kind of fell off a little bit. I'm not saying entirely, and obviously this result could flip around going into playoffs, but people are not giving enough credit for the amount of stride G2 take in like 2 weeks off time. Hooksy came in, didn't look great, had the wake-up call, and this entire event was doing fine. Not only fine, but I'd say good for an IGL, especially for the little time he's had on the roster. The only question mark is JKS, but he doesn't need to be good anymore. Like, considering how well the individuals in this event have played around Hooksy, there is no more question in my mind. This is what G2 is supposed to be, where anybody, I guess, albeit except Hooksy and JKS, any one of those three players is picking up the slack for one another. And they did that this entire event, whether it was Nico, whether it was Hunter, whether it was M0nesy. Everybody always delivered. On every map, if somebody didn't deliver, somebody else did. That's what G2 needed, because you always felt on paper that that's what should have been happening, but it never did, because you had Aleksib not necessarily delivering. You had uncomfortability in the system. You had Jax, who was never really that ace in the hole. There is no question in my mind that they are going to make it far in EPL, and if not, win the whole damn thing.
All right, Nioke, finish this question up before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually very difficult for me to kind of lean kind of either way, because of the question itself. Kind of, I know what Kassad's trying to say, but when you look, is this G2 side going to win anything? What is there to win for the rest of the year? Aside from you've got two things essentially that there is to win, or three. You've got Pro League, the Major, and Blast Finals. They're the only things that there is left. And because of how out there everything has been at the moment, it gets very difficult to say. There's no distinct best team anymore. There's no distinct one side who is so much more dominant than everyone else, as we've seen in kind of previous majors. And even, people try and make this argument about FaZe still being the best. Well, it's clear that they're not consistently the best, because G2 pulled them apart. I know there's kind of everyone's talking about this honeymoon phase, and it's a very valid point, because you've seen a lot of teams go through honeymoon phases and put off ridiculously good performances. But I think Hooksy has been looking very, very sound as a caller. He's, for me, making the rest of the team a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident. Because they're confident, they're consistent. That was always G2's biggest thing. The inconsistencies plagued them on such a regular basis that we can never have them in that conversation of the best team, because it'd be like, okay, but are they the best team today? Now, finally, they're looking consistent. 10-0 is a very good benchmark to be okay. There's a fairly decent conversation around this team actually being pretty good. We've got to see what they can do in playoffs, of course. But I think so far, so good. I think they have the potential to win things. it's just such early doors, and with like how much of a kind of a clusterfuck the top scene is right now, with kind of, you know, NAVI looking weaker than ever, arguably speaking, since like the Edward days, to be perfectly honest. You got FaZe, who are now starting to lose on a more than regular basis. Then it opens up this gap at the top for potentially a team to fill it in. And then that's when you look towards teams like G2 and Vitality. If they find a bit of, you know, brilliant form, they could take a Blast Finals. They could take I'm not saying they could take a major, but there's definitely an opportunity around them finally being able to close one out, because I know they've been looking for it. There's no clear best team is the best way to put it. But the way that they dismantled FaZe recently is proof in the pudding that this team has what it takes. M0nesy's popping off. They're playing well. You mentioned JKS. AnThran is a really good point to bring up as well. This is no longer JKS as a stand-in who needs to prove to everybody that he's actually a good player, or has to put off, you know, 1.4 ratings, be like, you know, guys, buy me, please. I am good, I promise. Like, he's got the contract, he's chilling. So now that he's comfortable, he can play his game, he can be that supporting utility player, not that hard carry who needs to drag these NA teams through to success. He actually can just be himself and play around the system that HooXi built. And I remember, as I said earlier, HooXi took a very kind of meh Copenhagen Flames team to top 8 at the major. He has the enough in him to be able to do it. The only caveat to it for me is, I know it's still the HooXi argument, but not everybody's Karrigan. Being able to make a top international team consistent, basically only Karrigan's done it. No one else has been able to make an international team consistent at the top level. And I know this is, you know, 10-0, but it's still not enough data to say for definite this team can win things. I think they have the potential with the youngsters like M0nesy coming through, just ridiculous. JKS plugging a gap, Nico being Nico, you know, arguably, you know, some people make the argument of him being the best rifler ever, right? So you got all these arguments. It's just the fact that making an international roster consistent in the top 3 is difficult, and basically only Karrigan's been able to do that. So that's the only thing that would make me say, but I'm going to lean in favor of buy, because it seems like so far everything is panning out for them to have success and to plug the gap at the top, because NAVI and FaZe are starting to just, you know, shake a little bit on that ice, and it's getting pretty thin. So I think there's definitely a world. I don't think it's out of the argument to say that G2 can potentially cause, you know, a bit of a ruckus at the top and potentially take a trophy. But I don't think you can securely say for definite G2 are the best team in the world. G2, you know, 10-0, oh, HooXi Giga Chad, this like dumb meme. You can, it's not that, but I think there's definitely proof in the pudding. It's just where they can find consistency, because Karrigan is the only IGL ever to do it at the top level. So that's the only thing, you know, there's no one to follow.
The next topic we're gonna hit on. The EG's the party astronauts lineup just won the Philadelphia over the weekend, but there was a conflict of interest that happened that both EG teams were playing at that event. Should both EG teams be allowed to compete in the same tournaments? Buy or save?
You don't even have to ask this question, bro, because everybody's gonna say the same thing. Save. Everybody says save.
Yeah.
Unless Frog's not waving at all yet. We gotta wait for his
Frog
response.
just said.
No,
Frog just agreed.
I agree.
I didn't hear.
It's huge conflict of interest.
Can we all gentlemen's agreement to skip this?
Agreement?
I mean, we might be.
What's a gentleman's agreement? We all get a point.
Yeah,
sure.
Can I say one thing?
Okay, mulligan question.
Yeah, okay.
Not points on the line, just one thing. If people want to understand why this is a problem, go and watch Richard Lewis's video. He literally explains it to perfection. If there's ever a possibility, it's a conflict. That's the best way of putting it. There's no possibility. I know we saw kind of people like Maui and like Striker or Prof kind of making these things like, oh, but you know, it's a nothing tournament. It's the precedent. It's not the fact that it's a nothing tournament. It's not the fact that it qualifies for nothing. It's not the fact there's no points on the line. It's just the fact that there's a world and a possibility where they were in the same bracket. E.g., PA and CD would have nearly played in the semifinals if CD didn't shit the bed. There was a world of possibility where for a final spot, they were playing each other. That is a conflict, because CD, if CD did anything sus, you know, one round where they threw, what is the first thought that's going to everyone's mind? Oh, well, they want PA to get to the final because PA have got to prove their worth. The conflict is there. If there's a potential, don't risk it. I don't see why they would.
I will give everyone a point because everyone agrees and everyone's said the same thing.
Yay, inflation!
Everyone gets the same point. Inflation, baby. We're living with it right now. All right, the next question. It was Apeks. Apeks kind of just bombed out of the RMR, the qualifier, and as well as bombed out of Frag because they were like propping like we're gonna go to Frag and conquer this stuff. Does this team survive to the next player break? What they gotta do, disband, anything? We'll go with Frog right here.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell. There's no way they make it to the player break with this 5. There's just absolutely no way in hell, right? I said it last time I was on the show. The average age for this team is absurdly high, and I get that could be a good thing with them, having all this experience. But Stico is going to take quite a while to get really comfortable and decide what his system is as an IGL. You're bringing in like a lot of different visions and stuff like that. There's JL, but he was what, like 22 or something like that. For him to be your sole young star carry, it's just not really gonna work. There's just not enough longevity with how old these players are. Sure, could they continue to do well in tier 3? I guess, but given what Apeks has been trying to do, right? They're trying to get, establish themselves as a really notable organization outside of Norway, I suppose, right? They want to really get internationally recognized, and bring in people like Shocks is great for brand awareness and stuff. It'll turn heads towards you, but you're not going to consistently win titles. You're not going to be a top 10 team, not with this roster. There's just absolutely no way.
Skriv?
Yeah, I don't know. I think as well, like, just to sort of add on to that, I'm on a save with this, or well, yeah. So they're not going to make it to the player rig, because I just feel like some of the players on this team will want quick results, especially Shocks. He's making, I mean, they must have some cash, right? Because he's kind of coming quite far down, I think it's safe to say, and their immediate results have not really been that great. Jacob, I think he's probably got to go, to be honest. He maybe looks like one of their better riflers, but it's just not enough. I don't know, man. I don't know. The big one to point towards is definitely got to be Stico for me, though. Kind of reiterating on what Frog's saying, but also, you got to look back to the teams. Mouse, who's like the first one to go, onto the FPX, which before that was Godsent. He was like even into No Chance. Did he even make it to Godsent? I don't think. I think Madden came in to replace him, right? So, he was the first one to go off of that squad that, maybe had legs and things like that. I think, unfortunately, he is always one that you look towards as, it's a like-for-like numbers change, right? He's a supportive element, but he's not the best supportive element in the world. He maybe doesn't bring an awful lot of the sort of intangibles to the team. So I think he's definitely got to go here, because I'm not really sold on the in-game leading kind of style. This team, on paper, JL, pretty hot prospect coming off the Mad Lions, Nork's got experience from the top level on NIP and still pretty young. Jacob, Shocks, Stico, Shocks and Jacob especially have played in some of, Jacob maybe not the best lineups ever, but Shocks definitely, right? This guy is incredible, the ceiling that he's had in the past. I feel like this team should be hitting the ground running. They're not. They're going to want quick results. And, you have a way more potential. And Cuban, as well, is a pretty well-rounded coach. So I feel like they have to very quickly make a move, because otherwise it's just going to start sinking. And, yeah, these players will want more out of this. And if it's not going well, mindset, all that, and, Shocks especially will probably be like, you know what, I'll take my my cash, want to keep competing, sure. And then maybe he'll just be like, after my contract's up, I'm just going to go stream for a bit, or I'm going to join some mates and go and play for Heat or Falcons, some of these players, and help out the French scene. I just think that they have to be very, very quick on the sell here. Otherwise, it could just be a sinking ship, and it sort of capsizes, to be honest. And for me, like I say, the two big ones, you still got potential with JL. So I feel like you got to get rid of Stico, switch things up, just bring in more fragging. If you want to make tier 2 work, you don't need the best in-game leader in the world. Just get some bigger numbers. And then Jacob would probably be the other one for me as well.
AnThran?
This is the easiest sell of my life, honestly. And I don't think people really talk about Shocks enough in this roster, because it is literally just a head changer. It is literally just, it's not a head scratcher, I guess, considering he was up for free agency. But if you watched him at Frag, you watched him in the player cams, you watched him after, he just wasn't that invested, man. I mean, at this point, it feels like he understands his career is coming to an end. He doesn't really put as much time into the game anymore. You can very obviously tell he doesn't have as much care for it. And that's no disrespect to him. Obviously, he's a legend in the game, and you can't discredit that. But I mean, ever since Liquid went, ever since he comes into Apeks, it more just feels like it's a PR stunt than anything. And that's not going to align. I also don't agree with Stico needing time either. Like, he's been in this roster for 8 months. And sure, albeit you bring in two big names in JL and Shocks, maybe that can change. But historically, it hasn't. He's had Jacob for a while. They still haven't really done anything. Apeks, they've been for just about as long as I can remember. It's like they had a decent thing going with their old lineups with Freddy Frog and all them. It looked like maybe there was a chance. Still think Chauzy got the short end of the stick. Definitely shouldn't have gotten cut. He's a very promising player if you watch him. But other than that, it's really hard to say. Like, there are pieces. On paper, this team does look really good. You've got the experience from just about everybody. That shouldn't be a lackluster part, but it just doesn't seem like they really have the drive, the care anymore. And I think that's the biggest factor for it. JL only really wasting time on this roster. Same thing goes for Knock. Both of those players could very easily still, I think, play at tier 1, if not like top tier 2. It's just more short ends of the stick, and I think easily this team disbands soon. They are a quick results want, but they are going to be a pop and drop team.
You okay, finish this off?
Well, so, I mean, the best way to simply put it is that this Apeks roster, it's just not it. I mean, it's just not that side. I mean, they came in and everyone was like, wow, this team's going to make a push for tier 1. And, like, I think if people were thinking that off the back, they were deluded. I mean, there's no evidence to support this claim. Even when you look at the players who have played at tier 1, the big one, all Shocks coming to this team, his recent form in tier 1 hasn't been the greatest. I know that kind of whole stint wasn't a dream. There's a lot of external factors that played into it. But generally speaking, as we've already kind of mentioned, that Shocks is getting on a little bit. And I don't think he's that kind of high-impact fragger who's just unbelievable and untouchable at times anymore. People know how he plays. People know where he plays and what they want to do to take him down, which has been proven over the last kind of, a few months to a year. And I think bringing him into this roster wasn't the puzzle piece that they needed. I think, generally speaking, for me, this Apeks side isn't the one that I'd want to be kind of putting my bank on, to be perfectly honest. Frog, you mentioned they're pretty old. There's not a longevity factor at all with Apeks. They couldn't qualify for the RMR, and those performances were brutal as well. They were losing against some pretty bad sides, to be perfectly honest. Sides that they really should walk over, to be perfectly honest. I don't know where they fixed this problem, because Stiko's still sort of learning to IGL essentially, but at the same time, I don't think Stiko's the bad factor. I think even if they move Stiko to a rifle role, he's a very good rifler. Move Stiko to a rifle role, bring in a more storied IGL. You look for some of the IGLs. I mean, I know it's a bit of a tough market at the moment, but free agent IGLs at the moment, maybe potentially like an Alex. And Alex could come in, he can call, he knows what he's doing, he's played at the tier 1 level. I know his performances haven't been great. What I'm saying is I don't think Stiko's the problem. I just think him IGLing could be a couple of problems. They've got good factors. JL is phenomenal. He's proved it with Mad Lions, or should I say ex-Mad Lions. They just before they disbanded, they won their last kind of tier 2 tournament. They've proven that they can compete at the upper echelon of tier 2, potentially make that conversation for steps in towards tier 1. We've seen it previously. We've seen Tropic make that step up. We've seen Copenhagen Flames make the step up. Even Skade, for a brief point, the Bulgarians had a good little conversation, and it looked like Mad Lions had all the right pieces to make that conversation. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Jacob as well. I think, if you build around JL and Jacob, you've got a really solid roster. Nork as well. He's proven that he can compete at the level. I think it's just this team as a whole isn't really what it is for me. And you mentioned Chauzy. I'm really sad to see Chauzy no longer in the roster, because I thought, for me, he was one of the hottest prospects coming out of Sweden. Him with an AWP was absolutely unstoppable. And then, of course, they forced him onto a rifle role, which isn't what he was playing on. If you look towards the stats when he was playing on Savage, that team went from a nothing team of everyone thought was just a random mix to them being in like the top 60 off the back of essentially what was Chauzy, tooth and nail pulling them to a lot of success. I think this team has the potential, but I don't think it's with this roster. I think they've got buckets of money to work with. I know the org Apeks is owned by a very, very prominent Norwegian. It's a lady, in fact, who has just unlimited money, from my understanding, and she's more than happy to put down the paycheck to sign whoever. But I just don't get the signing of Shocks. There's so many different better people who they could have picked up instead, who have proven that. I think it's very good for branding. It's very good for shirt sales. It's very bad for performance, because his performances over the last 3 months have been like what? Like he's averaging like just over a 1, I think. It's not been great. I think they were looking for quick results, bringing in a tier 1 guy of Shocks, but not bringing in the right tier 1 guy by any means, because I just feel like the roles are a bit of a mess. They're not allowing Jacob to play his roles as well. Jacob has to be super calm and refined now. Jacob as a rifler is brilliant. Like, he is unbelievably good and has proved it. But he's not playing his roles anymore. He's playing super passive now. He has to play a little bit more step back. When we saw Jacob, or we're playing previous rosters like Extremer, for example, Jacob was allowed to just free roam. He was allowed to do whatever he wants, be super aggressive, be the Jacob that he wants to be. Now he has to fit into this conform system of what is a kind of a fresher IGL of Stiko, who doesn't really know how to call around this team. Stiko doesn't seem to know how to use the puzzle pieces to his advantage, and that's why the team's falling short. I think they, on paper, looked great, but in the server looked really, really rough around the edges.
All right, we got the last question before we go to the clutch round between two people fight off against each other. So I gotta take a little small break for an ad.
If you're looking for the easiest and most fun way to spice up your CSGO viewing experience, it's Underdog Fantasy and their Pick'em game. Just look for your favorite players' stats and pick whether you think they'll end up with higher or lower than the projections for their games, and you can win up to 20 times your entry in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use app and website. It's easy to get started. Just download the Underdog Fantasy app or use the link below in the description, sign up with promo code NART, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100.
So last question for the clutch round. There was a Boomich report. Do you ever find him going on a tier 1 or tier 2 team in the upcoming player break? Because there was a report apparently Smooya in that stack with the bench warmers wanted to invite Boomich on, but he declined. Do you guys see him going on to a tier 1, tier 2 team? We'll go with AnThran first, and then we'll go Skriv, Frog, Nuke at the end.
I am an absolute sell on that. I do not think he is going to see the light of tier 1 again, at least without proving himself at a very much lower level. Right now, I think when I look at most of these top teams,
it could be tier 1 or tier 2. Just because
I know.
Obvious, okay?
I think the problem is, well, okay, tier 2 is a yes, but tier 1 is a no. I really think you do have to separate that question because I think it's
all right. Okay. Let's say tier 1. He's not. We'll go tier 2.
Tier 2, I could see tier 2 then. Tier 2 makes a lot more sense because right now it's a lot more fragile at tier 2, and I think experience, as we've already talked about in the show a lot, can do a lot for a team, especially in tier 2 caliber right now, especially with how many teams need it. You look down to that lower scene, and it feels like consistency is their big issue. Boomich, while he won't fix a fragging power, never really feels like you're relying on an entire team effort for fragging power in the tier 2 scene. I mean, Copenhagen Flames, I think, was that really rare exception, maybe in Tropic for a while. But for the most part, you look down at tier 2, and I think you've got like your big names, you've got your headliners on most rosters, but your big issue is experience and consistency. And that's something Boomich could definitely deliver upon. I mean, teams like EC Kiv, who do fairly well, and sometimes they're a bit lackluster. Boomich could probably whip them into shape a little bit with the extra experience. Obviously, there's controversy when it comes to CIS and when it comes to the whole stuff that.
Yeah,
I could see him going to a team like K23, who just lost their IGL to Evil Geniuses. I mean, he could turn them into something, maybe whip them into shape a little bit more. There's a world of possibilities for him there, but as for tier 1, it's absolutely not. I mean, he's already shown he doesn't have what it takes to go up there, at least fragging wise, and with how big it is to perform in tier 1 right now, as we just saw from a player like Hooksy, that's not going to fly anymore. So he's missed his chance with tier 1. He has to go back down to tier 2. I could see it happening. Maybe he performs better and then goes back up, but right now it's a sell on tier 1 and a buy on tier 2.
All right, Skriv.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll take a little bit of a different angle in the sense that he should be on a tier 1 team. To be honest, right? I feel like, we've got all this. It's like, well, how much is Blade and the drilling, and is it really boom? But I think that he's definitely worth for a tier 1 team. The old classic that sort of came around when he was removed a little bit before all the drama was going to Cloud9. I don't know. I think that there's maybe room. I don't know how good his English is. But I could definitely see him hitting into, the tier 1 space. In theory, it is kind of that, execution of like what team does he actually join? Maybe like a Spirit or something. I don't think that they would be too bothered all that much about optics. Would you call them a tier 1 team? Maybe 1.5 if we're really being pedantic about it. Tier 2 wise, I think could easily just slot in. But unfortunately, I think that there is. Which team would he go to in tier 1? Also, it's like, I don't think there's that many that will want to touch him this quickly, to be honest, because it's not a lot of him, but it's just, there was a fucking tidal wave, and people are obviously going to start making up their own minds and rehashing the story and remembering it differently and this, that, and the other. And obviously, he made the wrong decision, but we are sort of led to believe retroactively, results-based learning or whatever, that he was removed from NAVI kind of because he didn't want to move away from his girlfriend, and, they weren't too happy with that. So, but I will say, yeah, I think it would be cool to see him back. He could definitely bring to a team. I think Entropic's actually a great example in all fairness. Maybe 1 win or something like that, but I don't know if that's what he's going to want to do. He might get to a position where, look, they earned a lot of money in his tenure they earned a lot of money. So that's one angle. Does he want to compete? He's got other passions, you know. He loves making music or whatever. I think he'd be a great personality. Get on Twitch, get streaming, right? It'd be a lot of fun. Or maybe he goes into casting in the Russian language. That could also be a great move as well, to be fair. But I'm not sure. I think that there's a should angle, you know, but it's similar to Dev1ce. Will he come back? I actually don't think so. I don't think so. I think so much happens all at once. I think that Boomich is just gonna, at the very least, for like easily 6 months, which puts it after the player break if that's our timing, is just gonna take a back seat and not really do anything. Maybe if he gets some really good offers, but like I say, he won't get any really good offers. He will have to compromise. He will have to, you know, say, I still want to compete. That's what's most important to me, is competing. You know, is it winning? Well, maybe winning at tier 2, but winning at the top level, you're probably not going to be able to do that for a long time unless you can build up a team from the bottom. Is it money? Probably not, right? So the big drive here for Boomich has to be that he loves this game, he loves competing, and he cannot live without it. As indeed, making it to that level, you would kind of assume, but there may well have been something within that drama that has turned him off from all that stress and all that sort of competing at a top level. And yeah, I think that we'll probably see him move into, he'll stick around in the community, but I think he'll move into like a different role outside of playing.
Rog?
I'm gonna kind of go with more directly answering the question. Will he come back by the next player break? No, fuck no. In no capacity is
There
Boomich.
we go.
Tier 1, obviously, there's no space for him because let's be honest, like, you know, he's not coming back to Navi. I don't see him going to Spirit. Like, there's just no way he enters a tier 1 team. I don't think his English is good enough. And from like the, you know, murmurs I've heard through the scene, you know, there were apparently talks with G2 and stuff like that. He turned that down. Right? There's not going to be an opportunity for him to come back in an international team or in a CIS team at a tier 1 level. At a tier 2 level, maybe like 2 years from now, but that's it. Because, well, yes, Skriv brought up the whole, oh, you know, Kane, you know, kind of like that whole argument, or not Kane, sorry, Blade, you know, is kind of the mastermind behind the whole thing. And Boomich was sort of just like IGLing, but he was like the puppet that Kane had. I've got to say, I agree with that. And it's not just because, you know, recent times, oh, suddenly Electronic is doing well as an IGL. Look, anybody can play Navi system. It's because Boomich was just okay. He did the whole QBF win strike run, you know, he was not bad. And Navi had, you know, Dinosaur Zeus in the back, and they kind of needed somebody else to call. So he was just brought into the team. He just happened to do it. You know, sure, does that mean he learned things? Of course, you know, if he were to slot into K23, I'm sure he could get a lot out of that team. But I just don't see that happening. You also mentioned it, you know, oh, does he come back to tier 1 or tier 2? He didn't. He declined Benchwarmers or whatever they were called, Smooya's team, right? I mean, that's not even a tier 2 team if we're honest. Like that, and the fact that he has no interest in doing something like that because he's recording music, you know, there's no interest. Like clearly he's gone through some shit, right? And I don't like, even if we ignore the whole angle of like the scandal with his girlfriend and everything, all the allegations, right? None of it is true. Everyone forgets about it in a year's time. I still think Boomich is just clearly not interested in coming back right now. And in a way, I kind of understand him. He'll likely just take a break. I agree with Skriv that he'll probably remain in the community in some capacity because, you know, it made him who he is today. He's successful because of it. But likely he just becomes a streamer, right? There's a huge community of Russian-speaking people that watch CSGO. He could easily make a killing off of that. He was always super popular even back in the Win Strike days with singing and all that. If, you know, this whole album he's making, who knows, maybe gets added to the game down the line, you know, that'll be a nice little meme. Haha, funny. Like, people will remember Boomich. They'll remember his story, but I just don't see him coming back in any capacity as a player right now. And, you know, even if he were to slot in for Finnegan on K23 now, Finnegan's a way better player. Sure, he's not as experienced at a high level, but I just would much rather take a chance on Finnegan and pretty much every other IGL on their teams right now than take a chance on Boomich after what we've seen from him in Navi at a high level.
Me okay? Finish it off.
Yeah, actually, the only bad thing about being last is that kind of most of your points already get hashed.
Yeah.
But I have had some of these. Like I've had a kind of had this thought process already. I've had a similar conversation, so I can say there'll be a lot of similar things. But for me, there's just no way he goes back into tier 1. I mean, like there's no positives, there's no pros to him going back into tier 1. I mean, even when you look towards NAVI, we kind of already mentioned it. It's Blade's system. It's not Boomich's system. It's not Boomich's calling. It's Blade who set up the system, which means that anybody can jump into that IGL role, and all they have to do is make mid-round adjustments. Hence why Electronic, who's never historically been, the IGL by any means, has able to step in. And what, in his first game, didn't he drop like a 1.8 rating? I mean, that says it all, right? Anybody who's got the talent can step up. When you look towards kind of Boomich as a person, he was kind of that pop IGL. He was kind of just there to fill a gap of Zeus being too old, and they needed someone to step in who could just kind of like hold a mouse essentially. And he did that. Mentally though, he doesn't want to play CS. I think it's very clear to see that he is taking a much needed break. He's had a tough time, outside of the game, a tough time outside the server. He just needs a break, and I think he knows as well. It's best for him just to take a step away, because it's been a rough couple of months to a year, whatever. That he just needs a bit of a break. Hence why he's doing his music, doing his stuff as a personality, actually kind of enjoying life again. I think people really underestimate kind of how mentally straining playing CS full time is, traveling around the world, and also IGLing on top of that. It takes a lot out of him. So I think he just needs a bit of a break. I think for Boomich, though, he needs to find himself again. And I think it's not going to be going into tier 1. He's not going to waltz into any tier 1 team, because there's no pros of bringing him in. On top of the fact that he is essentially a bit of a brand risk as well. It's a little bit risky there. So no tier 1 teams can be like, oh yeah, Boomich. I mean, where are the kind of the positives around him? Because I really don't like this notion that, oh, he's an IGL, so he doesn't need to frag. Because if people live by that notion, you look towards recently when Hooksy had a stinker performance, that's all everyone was talking about. Twitter, which is a rye with, oh, Hooksy's is terrible for the last kind of week or whatever. Because he's an IGL not fragging. I don't like this notion. It's not good enough anymore, because we're seeing people like Carrigan step up as an IGLs. We're seeing a lot of these tier 2 IGLs come through, put a monster performances, proving that IGLs can do it both. So I think when you see kind of Boomich have a very mid, performance for a long, long time, you then see what's the positives. Because when you look towards Boomich, where are you getting the pros from? Because it's not his system that NAVI were using. So it's not even like him as a caller is going to bring in the positives. It's not his fragging, that's for damn sure. So it's not even like you're bringing him in for stats. So where are the positives? I think for Boomich, he just needs to find himself again. I think start bare bones, build a team around himself, drop in towards the tier 2 scene, look towards a mixed team, look towards finding. He's not even going to slot into, for me, I don't see him slot into any of these tier 2 teams. Not a 1-win, not a K23, any of them, because they don't need him. They've already got IGLs who are more than fine. I mean, and to be honest, IGLs aren't really the problem in CIS. I think with the amount of talent that's in tier 2 and tier 3, etc., CIS is arguably probably the most stacked region of any in the world in terms of these unbelievably cracked aimers who could just step up to the plate. So I don't think Boomich needs to just go straight back into tier 1, because that just won't work. It's to go back to the start, build a team around himself, pick up these youngsters that he knows, from the CIS region. There is thousands of them. Bro, just open up Face It. You find probably some decent ones, to be perfectly honest, with just the raw talent coming out of CIS. Build a roster around himself in tier 2, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But when you look towards the pros, I just don't see that many, because it's not his fragging, it's not his system, it's not his calling style. Not even like his mid-rounds were great, let's be perfectly honest. So in the grand scheme of things, Boomich isn't going to start into a tier 1 side. I don't see any world where he does, but I think it's more for the fact that the guy just needs a break. I mean, he's had a rough old year. Like, take a step away, enjoy life. He's loving the music. I think it's refreshing to see him happy again. Stay happy. You don't need CS, mate.
No. Neokate, you're in the clutch round with a three-way tie. The three-way tie. We can give you guys a quick point to say anything for a point to go against them. We'll start it off with Frog, AnThran, Skriv. Then me and the producer will decide who gets the point. So, say anything you want to say about any news you want to hit on really fast. Anything.
All right. So judge. I think we were meant to
30 seconds. Okay.
So we were meant to talk about this before, but apparently, the whole Crucial thing, getting kicked out of Endpoint. I'm happy it's happened. I love Crucial. He's a really nice guy. Seems like a super serviceable opper, but my God, did he need to get the fuck out of Endpoint for them to be a relevant team again? I'm glad they're picking up MHL. He's young, but he's super talented. He's got a bunch of experience. It's likely him. If it's not, I'd love to see maybe somebody like Wrinkle or Headtrick, right? A young, talented opper. Historically, Endpoint have taken chances on young, talented riflers. Time to do the same with the ops so they can actually be a relevant team and compete with other tiered 2 tier 1, maybe even teams in Europe, because having a good opera is what it takes to be at the top right now.
All right, AnThran.
Honestly, now that it's fresh on our minds, I still have a couple more things to add about Boomich. Like, if he's not going to come back now, I don't think he's going to come back at all. We talk about him being happy. We talk about him making music, all the alternatives he has. There is no reason for him to come back to a team if he doesn't do it in the near future, right? He's already lost motivation, as we talked about. Not a team that wants to touch him in play. He's making music. He's making money. He's living happy. He might even go to streaming, commentary. There is any spot in the scene he could go except the game that will not only provide him with the amount of money he needs to live, do well, and live happy, but just to relax. I mean, there's no reason to go back and do with all that stress, with all that controversy he has under his belt. There's no reason.
All right, Skriv.
I'll go for the EPL conference move, actually. They've decided to, put conference actually part of Pro League. I think that all round it's a pretty good move. We already touched on FTW. They lost a couple players, right? So you're not going to get shagged, as we say in the UK, by these roster moves that can occur in between, get your players poached. I also really like it because it's going to get more people watching these tier 2 teams. They're trying to connect the Pro League name to conference, and that's fair enough. But now it's like more of a build-up for the tournament. If I was going to watch Pro League anyway, I might watch these guys, so I have a bit more of an idea about the new teams that are coming in. So I'm a massive fan of them moving conference so it's a bit closer. There's a few issues with, nomenclature, and it gets a bit conflated, having all these challenger tournaments and how do they feed into each other and whatnot. So I think it reduces some of that confusion because indeed, now conference goes into Pro League, and we're going to get like a good 8 or 9 weeks of Counterstrike off the back of that.
All right. So with Chris, the producer here, we have Neil K versus Skriv. Sorry, AnThran. Sorry, Frog.
Oof.
I got screwed. All I can say, I got screwed. Bro, you don't think I heard you motherfuckers reaching out of your ass for those points? I know Skriv during his little thing. Skriv, I saw him 3 different times look at the screen and go, all right, come on, just one more. This motherfucker, whatever.
I needed something fresh. I needed something fresh. I couldn't go back to a point that had already been
I want a
made.
bonus round before you start that. I want you guys. No. Hold on. I don't want last place. I think I rightfully didn't earn last place, but I'm tied with Frog. You guys need to create another prop.
You're already black and white, bro.
Yeah,
fine. I'm not competing in this. I'm competing for not last place because I rightfully did not get last place, but y'all motherfuckers want to try to put that shit on me. So come up with another prompt, come back, and we fight for third.
Hey.
What the fuck?
No.
Yes. Get his ass.
If I recall correctly, before we hit the buy or save, you were second place, so you were not last place.
That's not. I wasn't last place. No, and then you changed the rules mid game.
You weren't last place. I just said
it's a collective third.
Yeah. No. I don't want no collective third.
You got that bronze trophy, man.
Give me third place. He gets fourth.
All right. We'll give you that.
Not last, fuckers!
All right.
This is the most American Canadian moment I've ever seen.
Bro, if I didn't ask you who was in Paris, I would have won over you.
Yeah,
loud, obnoxious.
Yeah, maybe you should.
I want to say I gave AnThran a point for making fun of Sagka at one point, so it kind of evened out.
I did do that.
I noticed.
You brought me out for the personality. I gave you the personality. You docked me for the personality. Fuck do you want?
But this is funny, so
Damn.
All right.
You weren't last. You were third. Confirmed. I thought you'd be gone. I thought you'd be gone immediately, but you pull out the shades and you got there pretty good. Okay, you happy?
I worked so hard.
You worked so hard. You didn't get last.
Whoever's winning in the beginning loses.
All right, we gotta do this stuff. The clutch round fast. So, see, you two, the points are at 0-0, so it's a 1-1. One guy gets it, one guy gets it. Got it?
Okay.
All right. I am China just got scratched off during the year due to the COVID issues. With that, and also how the Chinese scene's going, what's your biggest improvement you guys can do to help the Asian scene?
Can I take the floor here before you start, Skriv? I know you've been doing a lot of Challenger League recently, but I did a lot of Challenger League last season, and I've just done obviously seen Wings Up at Melbourne. I think finally we're seeing people wake up to how good Asian CSGO actually is. Like there is a lot of competent teams coming out of Asian CSGO who are better than a lot of scenes. I mean, even when you look towards the RMR, for example, the fact that NA has doubled the teams competing essentially is just moronic, because third and fourth from Asia, you look towards kind of their qualifier, because Rare Atom made it through from the Chinese qualifier and they took down Wings Up, and then IHC made it through kind of the rest of Asia, and then they had Greyhound from Australia, Oceania, which makes complete sense because they are the best team. Vertex are in the bin. They've got 3 stand-ins at the moment. I mean, the only guy they got consistently is Brace, the IGL, who, bless him, he's like 18 years old. And then you look towards the last team, which was GG How International. A little bit of a mix, let's be honest. It's like Mezthal, the FBL god, and then they got like Facecrack and Davcost, who are running it back to like 2018. So kind of it's cool to see them. But when you look at the teams coming out, especially kind of like China, for example, like Wings Up are more like, for example, Wings Up are better than kind of 5th to 8th in North America, and I'll stand by that happily. And some of the other teams that are there, Tyloo, they still got really decent. And Bentet's really still kind of got it. I mean, they've just been kind of meh overall. I think the Asian scene is getting the respect it deserves, but not enough. Rare Atom have for a long time proved they are more than capable. We saw Rare Atom at Valencia not even that long ago, and they were very, very competent. I think Skriv, you were in their casting, am I right in saying? Rare Atom were a very decent team. They actually should have been at conference as well, but due to visa issues, Tyloo had to fill in, and they weren't really the best team to fill in. IHC, of course, granted, they weren't the best performance of the major, but in the grand scheme of things, they're a side for me who I think Asia as a region is not getting enough respect. It should have more spots, because kind of 3rd to 4th in Asia is better than 5th to 8th in NA, and I'll stand by that. So the fact that NA is having, I'm not being funny, teams like Squirtle Squad going to their RMR when there's actual competent orgs over there, I just feel like they're getting slept on, which is hence why China's getting kind of pushed on the back burner. Of course, COVID got in the way. I think they've still got really hefty COVID restrictions in China, which makes it all the more uncomfortable. But I think with a lot of the kind of the policy changes, I don't want to get too deep into the politics of China because that's a slippery slope. But they've even got the thing of if you're under 18, you can't play more than like an hour a day or something like that. There's a lot of things over there fundamentally that make playing CS in China very, very difficult, and that for me makes China a little bit of a complication. There was rumors that Perfect World were going to get the major over Blast. That would have been awesome, because at the very least we could have had an earlier revitalization to Asian CSGO. However, it's been pushed on the back burner. I don't know. For me, I'm a big fan. I think there's a lot of talent there, a lot of teams who are proving their worth. Wings Up have just done it. They took down the 15th best team in the world, OG, which, they absolutely dismantled Dexter, who for a long time has been one of the better AWPers in kind of, outside of the top 10. We're finally seeing teams step up, but they're still not kind of getting the respect that they deserve. And I'd like to see a thing like China or Beijing or something in somewhere to kind of really boost the kind of the localized scene, to kind of prove that there actually is a lot of talent coming out of Asia that deserve respect that people aren't given.
All right, Skriv.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a fair amount of agreement on my side. What I will say, I think maybe some like ESL back tournaments or whatever, this would also spread to some of the other, cash cups and things. Like maybe we could see those over in China or in the Asian region, right? Yeah, I think some like ESL backed more domestic kind of tournaments, perhaps a bit more of a figuring out, and maybe it is down to how many teams there are, but we touched on this a little bit earlier beforehand, so I will say, it's a slightly half borrowed point, but a lot of the teams, just sort of there's no breakdown in the ESEAs and all the qualifications. Exactly. So there's a massive split when you're in ECL, which is meant to be, their sort of league that allows these teams a bit more development, and then they're playing in conference, so they get experience against teams that are better but not quite the world-ending teams that are just going to ruin them. So are they really learning anything, etc. And so the split there is really silly sometimes, and I think that it's like, I watch Rare Atom today, and they're doing, it's like, if they're playing against an Entropic or a Heat or a Sprout or whatever, they're not going to do these things. They were just playing really silly, but it was working because they're just mechanically better than their opponents, So I think in terms of like the development and whatnot, it's a bit of a challenge. Coming over to Europe as well, I think is another move that would be really solid. They suffer a little bit similar to NA, where it's like, where's the backing? Where's the, it's hard to get these teams across and whatnot. But yeah, and I think a better development of like the young players and things like that, maybe get an academy team in somewhere, right? And let's see what they can do when it's a much sort of more level playing field against some of the lesser experienced EU teams, like they would be as well. But yeah, it's kind of a difficult one because I think as well getting the game in. I hope that Perfect World, because of this, I hope that Perfect World get the next major afterwards. Now
I agree.
we've
Yeah.
touched on all the major and everything, and it's like it's going to be a real challenge to follow up after these two bangers. But it would be really solid because there's sort of many conversations around like the drive and the mentality of Asian esports players and whatnot, and the best CS:GO player probably plays League of Legends, and I think that the ultimate like drive and the ultimate getting people on board with CS in Asia has never really been the same as it has with League, Dota, Overwatch, right? So hopefully we can get a major out there and that'd get a few more people behind it. But it's definitely, I'm on board with Neokai. It's definitely better. A few, I wouldn't say a couple, but maybe 4 or 5 when international Counterstrike was, more at its height. We had maybe 2 teams, and even then, it's like, Tyloo will maybe get a map. Karsdale have a cool round on Vici, but beyond that, it's like there really wasn't an awful lot against any caliber of EU team. Whereas now, there's some legitimate stuff where they're playing teams from across the world, from higher in EU, or the sort of mid-level where it's like some SA teams or whatever, and they are indeed, picking up dubs and looking decent. Now, we'll see, because I think it's an interesting sort of spot where it's at, because it's like, are they better or are they just not as prepped for the style, right? As people start to respect Asia more, will there be a bit of a trough, as it were, once teams get used to them again? I don't know, but it's a difficult one. It's the Asian question, is a pretty big one in Counter-Strike. But the ultimate agreement is like, get the RMR sorted out, boys. What the hell is going on there?
I mean, the fact that every other region gets more teams, I think is I think it's blatant disrespect. But I think fundamentally, there's a problem there. You mentioned like when you look towards Asia as a region, it's League of Legends, it's Dota, it's Overwatch, it's everything else but CS:GO, even Valorant. I mean, like some of those teams coming out of Asia have been unbelievable. Paper X for a long time have been farming. You got some of those Korean guys who are stepping up huge as well. I mean, that's it basically. So I think fundamentally is a change, because the fact that it goes from ESEA Open straight to Challenger League just shows that there just isn't like the competitiveness there. But I feel also bad for them that they can't scrim against good teams. They can only scrim against themselves because of ping issues, so they can never improve as a region just because of their location, which is the same problem that Australia has as well. So I don't know. I can harp on forever about it, but I'll leave it there.
All right. I know AnThran and Frog want to say something. We'll wait to the end for you guys to say your point. So hold on. Next question. Smooya had a hot take on the last HLTV podcast right there. It will say that Dev1ce can replace m0nesy if he is open. Do you guys agree? Do you guys ever see this happening? We'll go with Skriv first.
Yes, I did it full first.
Sorry, what was that?
Unless you want me to go first, I'm happy to.
No, I'm cool to go first. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It feels like such a ridiculous thing to say from Smooya. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think so. Like, not a chance, to be honest. I think m0nesy is young. He looks great for his age. I think he could be, one of the best players that we see over the next sort of 5 years. Maybe start, because here's the thing as well. We're getting to a point in CS where, we've got GOAT status for players in like 1.6. Those guys end up, on NIP. You got Neo as well. Maybe is in there.
Remember, this is theoretically. Remember, this is a theoretically movement.
Yeah. But all I'm saying is like, I feel that Dev1ce has played in the era of a different GOAT. I think that m0nesy is going to outlive outlive's a bit crazy. But in the game, he will still be around when Dev1ce stops playing, when Simple stops playing, and then he will be in his prime. We're generally looking at 22, 23, 24 to be the prime of a player. So m0nesy has the chance to start arguing and start his own legacy, be the GOAT of his era, and then start battling against, those players that have come before him. We're starting to hit that kind of level where it's like, your Muhammad Ali was the GOAT of his era, but then you'd say Mike Tyson's a better boxer, and then it goes on and it goes on because you've got the compounded knowledge and all that of the players that came before them. So yeah, and I just think it's like, if it were next week and Dev1ce becomes available, they're not going to make a change. They're not going to pick him up, right? 6 months, they're not going to pick him up. I think that Dev1ce, it's such a difficult one. He obviously has like a really solid ceiling, but I think that you can put your chips into m0nesy as G2 and you don't need to get Dev1ce. Also, there's just the monetary aspect. It's like, why would they? Maybe indeed, if you can get Dev1ce for free, I get it. But you've spent all this money on m0nesy, and it's not like he's looking bad. It's not like he's going to be the problem within your team, at least for now. We'll see what happens. You know, give it the major and can he perform there? But yeah, I just think it's Smooya's hot take kind of sums that one up for me. I won't lie to you. I think he's a great personality, but
you're saying that's an AnThran level take.
Yes, 1,000.
Okay.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, if you're going
no, wait.
Go on, sorry, yeah.
I think AnThran was a little smarter than that take. I'll give him that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know.
Skriv, all I'm saying is Dust2 is not as heavy as an op map as Inferno. That's all I'm saying.
All right, God. Here we go.
I guess, yeah. I mean, the first thing that has to be said is, you know, if anyone's backing or doubling down on a Smooya hot take, what are you doing? To be perfectly honest, I mean, where's the logic behind trusting anything he says? To be perfectly honest, there's a reason he's not on a team. Okay. But first of all, give me, you know, what is the logical reason? I'll play devil's advocate. I'll play both sides. So m0nesy, he is not one of the best young player in the world. Like there's no two ways about it. He is the best future prospect, skill ceiling. There is no one who kind of reaches up to his level at the moment in terms of what this guy can provide. There's even, you know, there's a world and a possibility where m0nesy can just keep pushing this game further and further, and no one's ever kind of expected it. So I think for me, m0nesy, it doesn't make sense. You've got to think of everything in terms of what they've just spent on him. Why would they even go out of their way to then bring in Dev1ce? There's the other side, which is kind of, you know, you look towards Dev1ce. He's got the experience. He's got the consistency. They don't need to mold him by any means. He's got major wins under his belt. He is, you know, at one point, probably, well, not one point. I mean, even people make the argument, probably the best AWPer ever. You know, some people were making an argument for a long, long time, you know, before, of course, Simple started to step up in his own regards. Zayu came on the scene. But, you know, we're talking about the GOAT conversation. Dev1ce was in it for a long, long time. I think, you know, consistency and Dev1ce's peak was unbelievable. And there's the positives there. But there's a lot of ring rust. This guy hasn't played an official in like a year and a half. And I know people keep harking on about, oh my God, he drops 40 in an FPL. Who cares? Like, who actually cares? Because you've got kind of Loban Jika's dropping 35 sometimes. So don't be coming to me thinking he's going to be the next GOAT. That's not the metrics to go off. He's playing FPL, so therefore he's got to be good. Or he's playing Face at level 10, 5k elo, and he's dropping 40 kills, so he's got to be the best player. He hasn't played an official in like a year and a half. And then you've got the other things about him having kind of, you know, the errors in terms of his mental game, getting tilted, benching himself, essentially. You've got all of those at faucets. I just don't see the benefits of dropping what is basically the hottest prospect to have kind of, you know, entered the game since, well, I mean, essentially even like Simple way back when, you know, flip side kind of thing, early days Liquid. There's never been a player for me that has the potential skill ceiling the way m0nesy has. Build a roster around him. Build a roster, a future around him. He's still literally by law a child. I mean, it's just a dreamboat of a player who can continue to push G2 further. I mean, I don't see why they need to make any changes. I don't see any of the benefits of bringing Dev1ce in, who's got all this ring rust about him not playing for a year and a half, whatnot. Keep m0nesy. There's no benefits of Dev1ce. I know in terms of the AWPing style, it could be good because of course you've got two polar opposite AWPers is the argument. It depends what system you want to play. m0nesy is a shotgun AWPer. He's one of the most aggro AWPers going. I mean, he's the ridiculous high sense, the flicks, that he's a superstar showdown. But then you look towards Dev1ce. Dev1ce gets slept on a bit of times, especially kind of his AWPing style, because he's the god of holding angles. He doesn't make mistakes. Dev1ce is so good that for a long time, when he was, you know, winning majors with Astralis and whatnot, AWPers were trying to mold themselves to be Dev1ce. They were doing the same plays Dev1ce was doing. Dev1ce literally invented how to play an AWP on Inferno. You look towards Banana, go towards Banana, take the first peek, fall back towards, you know, that half wall, take another peek, fall back towards kind of the corner of the building, fall back towards CT, rotate to Coffin. That's Dev1ce. Dev1ce started this sort of AWPing style of like consistency, efficiency, perfection. However, he's not been in the game for a year and a half, and they've got this god kid who is just destroying and dumpstering everyone.
All right, guys.
And only seems to get better.
All right. Last question. This has to go fast because there's a little situation happening around my house at the moment. So okay. I need to. So we got like.
We have points to add too, so make it quick, you fuckers.
You're
all right. Last question. Last question. This is the last one. NAVI have recently been practicing Vertigo of late, and which was their permaban. Are they going to shock us at the major playing this or like an upcoming event? And what map are they scratching? Make it fast. We'll go with Neil. Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any negatives of adding the map to the pool. I think it's always been kind of their perma for a long time. They've struggled on it. I think it's like to say when we've seen them play it, which is very rarely, it's been pretty brutal. So I don't think I didn't expect it originally, to be perfectly honest, but I did hear those rumors and I understand what they're trying to do. We've even seen the same things happen. For example, Imperial doing the exact same thing right now because Cello is changing the way in which Imperial call. Imperial, before Cello, had a 5-map pool. That's how brutal it was for them. So they were very easy to win a veto win when it came towards a best of 3. So, you know, Cello's now bringing in, it actually, funnily enough, is Vertigo as well, right? It's the same situation as it was NAVI. It's obviously that they're stagnating. They need to make a change. Something needs to happen for them. And I think that adding this map to the pool, which potentially could cause something different than Major, is a massive addition to them. We saw the same thing happen with maps like AnThran, for example. When it first got added into the pool, teams like Copenhagen Flames made a name of themselves off the back of Ancient. There was one point where Copenhagen Flames had 29 maps played on Ancient, and they'd only lost 3 of them. I mean, they had the most ridiculous statistics. They'll put up ridiculous numbers. And I think for NAVI, they need to follow a same suit and do something different because they can't keep stagnating.
One map are they
replacing? And one map they're replacing.
You think so?
I think it's got to be Ancient. I just don't like their Ancient, to be perfectly honest. I mean, even Endpoint, I managed to kind of prove that, and that's saying something. And I'm a UK boy. That Endpoint, with the colossal changes they need to make, managed to take them down, and pretty convincingly. It has to be Ancient for me.
All right, Skriv, we gotta move on. Remember that I gotta go.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely agree. I think Ancient getting taken out, also worth noting, had to double check there, of course, but they lost it to Fnatic as well. So I think it has been sort of their weakest map that they play for a while. It's also just a bit of a whack map, you know. Like I can definitely why not change, you know, one for the other, right? The sort of second worst design map in the pool for the worst design map. Why not? But yeah, and I think they need a change, right? So they internally, Some Die Young's the obvious one coming in. Is he going to be sticking around? Don't really know. Probably will be for the major, right? Unless they do something wild. And then the other thing is that Electronic, you know, is moving on to calling. I think it'd suit his style of calling, actually, sort of wanting to lead from the front a bit more rather than, you know, slightly more system-y, we could say, with Boomich. So I think that a map like Vertigo that moves very fast will probably suit Electronic. Yeah, I mean, sure, there's nothing really wrong with it, especially like practicing it. And I think that they need something fresh. They've not been the top team for a while. Now is the time. It's kind of, you know, we've had like the 3 majors, obviously the 2 that have gone by where it's like, now's Simple's time. Very cool. Happened. Now's Carrigan's time. Very cool. Happened. And this third one is a lot more up in the air. The gap's closed between 1 and 2, as we've been talking about. And right, even, guys, you know, fades don't look as solid. So yeah, I think that now's a good time. They've got changes with players. And of course, the fact that they need to jig something up because they're not quite as solid a team as they were 6 months ago, even.
And Vertigo's easier to call than Ancient, is the best way to put it. And sure, they don't actually have an official IGL, it's Blaze system. So, you know, let's be perfectly honest. Vertigo's easier to call than Ancient. Bring in Vertigo because it's easier to read.
All right. We're going to declare the winner right now. We're going to have NeoK win due to all the stuff that he said. He's the official winner for this week. You have...
You fucking deserve to be here, Skriv.
No, it's cool, man. I'm happy to come second.
30 seconds to say whatever you want right now.
Stole that shit.
What, for me or for the others?
Yes, for you.
You know, it's my debut, so I'm glad I made it.
It could be outside CS as well.
Okay, so. Well, can I say whatever I want? Can I plug something?
Whatever you want.
Ah, well, you know, on my debut to win, I actually take it. If you want more great hot takes, I have my own podcast just started on YouTube, so you can go and check that out. Follow me on Twitter. All my links are there, so you can go and check out my own podcast. It's me, Paladin, and Trav. We talk about a lot of CSGO. We know our stuff. Come swing by. It's good times. Got a new episode coming out on Friday as well. So there we go.
All right.
Copy my whole fucking flow. Word for word, bar for bar.
I went first. That doesn't make any sense.
AnThran, you want to say something?
Yeah, earlier NeoKai said he wasn't a big fan of the fact that Asia didn't get many RMR spots, considering they're better than most teams in NA, which I firmly agree with. I fucking hate the RMR system. I absolutely hate that it's region to region. I think that is so dumb. Like, it depends. What are you looking for? What I do. What are you looking for in a Counterstrike major? Are you looking for representation from different countries? Because we can already answer that in external events ourselves. Like, I don't think that should be the pinnacle of Counterstrike. Counterstrike at a major supposed to be the best of the best. So why do we consistently have fucking Order coming to the major to go 0-3 every single time? Like, no disrespect to anybody personally, but you don't deserve to be there. Like, I will stand by that. Fucking Squirtle Squad would not beat any of the top dogs in NA when it comes up to that. And I love them. I literally have friends on that team. Guys, I love you. You wouldn't. It's like, why does that make any sense? There should just legitimately be like RMR qualificant spots. You throw them all into one, you spit them out all into one.
Frog, anything you want to say before we close up?
Not that we have time for. I just felt like when it came to the Asian stuff, we didn't really give any suggestions as to how to, benefit the scene, if I'm honest. But, I think realistically, I want to see more out of an Asian TO, right? Whether that be FunSpark, Perfect World, we need to see more out of events out of them. We need to see them on HLTV. There needs to be good English coverage with actual casters, not last minute things, because no one's going to care about the region otherwise. So you need to get viewership involved. There should be an Asian and probably an Oceanic player in the CSPPA to represent those two huge regions.
I think there is going to be one, by the way.
All right, guys.
Impression. Awesome. I think Impression stepping up.
Perfect.
All right, guys. I want to thank everyone for showing up. Sorry for closing up a little early. Just a situation that happened outside of my house. It's ridiculous right now. I want to thank AnThran, Skriv, Frog, and Yoke for joining us and see us out here at number 15. Also want to thank our sponsors, Refrag. Use the code NART to save 15%. Underdog, use the code NART to match their deposit up to first $100. And use the card. Also, thank Manscaped and use the code NART20 to save 20% off on your next purchase. Again, I want to thank everyone for showing up. I want to thank our producer, Wearable, for doing an amazing job. And peace out.